He was born into a world of magic, but he didn't have any magical skills of his own, so he decided he was going to become the strongest magician by taking out every monster in the dungeon with his sword. The story starts with this dude named Will living in a world where magic is like the holy grail, but damn, my man got the short end of the stick because he ain't got no magical talent. Still, they enrolled his ass in one of them fancy-ass academies, but the problem is how the hell is a dude with zero magic gonna make it in a university like this? He decides to tackle this problem by perfecting his skills with the sword and heads off to high-level dungeons, regularly scraping with giant beasts, shooting magic spells at him, which he dodges and uses his incredible speed and skills with his sword to utterly stunt on the monster and slice it in half with a single slash. That was just a warm-up though, as he realizes he's got to handle a bunch more of these creatures if he wants to make it out of that dungeon alive. But that ain't no biggie for him because he's done it plenty of times before. The next morning, he drags his tired ass to class, where a professor named Edward teaching them about the basics of alchemy and how to produce sulfur, which helps in the creation of explosives. Edward notices Will nodding off in the back, so he calls his name, but unaware Will keeps snoring till Edward shouts his damn name. Will jumps up, all surprised and shit. Edward calls him to the front and tells him to show the class what they just learned. Ain't no escape for Will, he gotta step up in front of everybody and demonstrate. Edward tells him it's super easy and all he's gotta do is produce some flames and sulfur will be created. Will's hands are shaking as he pulls out his wand and starts chanting the spell for flames. But to his disappointment, not even a damn spark comes out of that wand. The whole class starts laughing at him like he's some kind of stand-up comedian. But the teacher shuts them up real quick. Edward looks at Will with disgust, wondering how the hell a theory genius like him can flop so hard in practical magic, and he wonders how Will even got selected for this academy. Then out of nowhere, this fiery-haired dude named Chian whips out his wand, all confident-like, and aims it at the stuff on the desk. He busts out his flame magic, straight up torching everything and creating sulfur, while poor Will hides behind the fire like a scaredy cat. Edward tells Chian not to do any shit like that without permission, as he immediately creates a huge crystal of sulfur with his magic spell. He starts preaching about how magic is the most important thing in this world and how mages are straight-up heroes. According to him, if you want to survive at this academy, you need to be damn good at magic, and fools who have no idea how to control magic should simply leave the academy. After class, Chian and his crew walk over to Will, trying to embarrass the dude. They say he can only handle weak-ass dungeon monsters. But then Will's childhood friend Kali steps in like a boss, telling Chen to back off as he's much nicer than him and his group. Chian gets a little flustered but brushes it off, talking about how kindness and hard work won't mean shit without magic. Then he bounces with his goons. Will and Kali start walking together and she tells him not to stress too much. But Will's used to this bullying crap as he looks up at the sky and says it looks beautiful. Turns out a few years back, humans were trapped in darkness, scared of some evil spirits casting shadows all over the damn world. But luckily, 5 badass mages known as the Mangiavander stepped up and fought those evil spirits. They kicked their asses and freed the humans, showing them what the real sky looked like. These mages were known as the Mangiavander, and that title now passes down to the most powerful mages of this world. Will remembers a promise he made to his childhood friend Elfaria, who used to read him storybooks about the Mangiavander, and they made a pact with each other that they'd become the Mangiavander one day. Elfaria kept her end of the bargain as she had crazy talent and rose up the ranks quickly, becoming the youngest Mangiavander in history and started living in the Divine Tower. While Will's just barely hanging on, far from average, trying to hold onto that dream and promise. Later that same day, Will rolls up to meet Professor Wagner, but damn, this dude starts straight up yelling when he finds out that this Harry Potter copycat went solo into level 7 in the dungeons. Wagner warns him that one day he's gonna end up dead. Will drops to the ground and apologizes like crazy, but asks if he'll get credit for it or not. Wagner lets out a sigh and tosses him 2 credits for his troubles. Will starts celebrating, but then Wagner asks him if he's still clinging onto that Vander dream. Wagner explains that if Will wants even a tiny chance of becoming a Vander, he gotta get into the Upper Institute. To do that, he needs a boatload of credits in writing, spell work, and fighting. But if my man can't use spells, he ain't getting no spell work credits. So no matter how many credits he racks up in the other areas, he won't qualify. Will says no matter what, he's gonna try. So Wagner tells him he gotta graduate first, but as far as he knows, Will needs 4 more credits by the end of the week. This news shocks the hell out of Will, and he starts hunting down monsters that can give him those 4 credits. Wagner mentions this monster called Baskerville on the 6th floor that ain't been defeated yet. Will gets all hyped up and hugs his teacher. But little does he know, Chian overhears the whole thing and decides to hit up the dungeons himself. He wants to kill that monster before Will does so he can boot him out of the academy for lacking credits. Later that evening, Will enters the damn cave with his sidekick Kiki, telling her to use her nose to sniff out the monster. But Kiki ain't feeling it because the last time when Will fought at Baskerville, she got straight up roasted by its breath. On the other side, Sheehan and his crew step into the 6th floor, all determined to find that beast before Will does, so he gets kicked out. One of his lackeys with some pink feminist hair asks if it's a good idea for just 3 mages to venture in, but Sheehan shoots him a mean look, claiming he's one of the best mages in the class and can handle it. He's walking with a bunch of racist, angry thoughts in his head and tells his crew to use their scam magic to track down the beast's location. When suddenly, this massive beast pops up and straight up decks the spiky-haired dude so hard he becomes a freaking pancake on the wall. Shin's in disbelief, frozen in place, while the feminist starts shrieking like a banshee out of sheer terror. Will hears the screams and springs into action, hauling ass towards the noise because he's worried someone's getting messed up. He turns a corner and spots Shan on the ground, blasting fire at the monster. But this creature ain't phased one bit. Will recognizes it as the Evil Sentinel, a super tough monster worth 10 credit scores. He wonders what the hell it's doing in this dungeon level. He realizes that Shan's magic ain't jack against this beast. It just brushes off those flame blasts and keeps coming for the scared shitless boy. Will considers helping him out, but then he remembers all the times this jerk mocks him for no reason. That makes him want to shut his eyes and pretend he didn't see a thing. But then he thinks about Elfaria, who always said he was the kindest person she knew. She even gave him a pair of glasses as a gift. That reminder brings him back to his true self, and he puts on the glasses just as the monster raises its weapon to finish off that cocky brat once and for all. Will blocks the monster's attack just in time, pushing it away and saving Chen's sorry ass. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Edward barges into Wagner's room and demands that he send his familiar straight into the dungeons. Turns out, Shingen and his lackey snuck into the 6th floor without permission. Wagner realizes what's going down but tells Edward not to sweat it because Will's on that same floor too. Back in the damn dungeon, Will keeps going head-to-head with the monster, blocking its attacks, dodging like a boss, and slicing off a finger with a swift slash to its arm. The monster gets all pissed off and tries to strike back, but Will's moving through the air like a freaking eagle, dodging that shit. Finally, the monster manages to land a hit on Will, but my man blocks it with his sword. He gets blasted back, and the monster starts chucking rocks at him. But Will slices right through them like it's nothing. He's jumping all around that monster, landing on its back and straight up stabbing it through the neck. The monster starts flailing around while Chayan's jaw is on the damn floor witnessing Will's skills. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Edward is also losing his mind seeing this, while Wagner says Will is an outcast because he ain't got magic, but his strength is superhuman for a mage. Dude's tough as hell like a dwarf and his brain's so damn sharp, he can learn an attack pattern just by glancing at someone. They watch as Will chops off a monster's arm like it's nothing, then casually strolls over to this giant-ass sword on the ground. Will effortlessly picks up that beast of a blade, and Wagner tells Edward that in a world full of magic and wizards, was the only Dan warrior. The monster shoots an energy beam from its mouth, but Will blocks it with the giant sword, then slashes the hell out of that monster, slicing it up into tiny pieces that drop to the ground lifeless. Will walks over and helps chin up, and the dude's still in shock. Edward's mind is blown and he's yelling at Wagner, saying a person without magic can never surpass a magician. Then he storms out of the room all pissed off. Wagner knows Edward's hella mad right now, but he also knows that Will's story is gonna become a freaking legend as he will turn the whole damn world upside down by making Wistoria the only place where a wand and a sword meet. 5 years back, Willie was the ultimate joke at that whole school due to his lack of magic. And apparently the only reason they even let his sorry ass enroll in the school was because he was tight with Elfaria. But once she became the Magiavander, the school didn't need to fake being nice to him anymore. Willie had to put up with all that shade, but it didn't stop him from hustling hard to graduate no matter what. Wagner rolled with Willie to see the headmistress, and no doubt she had her doubts about whether Willie had what it takes for this school. But once she hands him a sword and puts him to the test, Willie straight up counters every single one of her fire spells in a split second. She's blown away and says Willie can stay in the school. Wagner's hella surprised because he didn't think it would be so damn easy to convince her. Willie ain't got no magic, but the headmistress thinks it'll be a blast having someone like Willie around. Willie asks the headmistress if he can roll with Elfaria again if he gets strong enough, and she tells him straight up he's gotta grind like crazy and not let any challenges shake him. But even then, there ain't no guarantees. But as Willie bounces, she drops a line about being excited to see what he can pull off. Fast forward to now, Willie's chilling in Wagner's class while he schools everyone on the Tower of Magic. Climbing that tower means moving up to the Upper Institute and reaching the top floor to become a Magiavander. Right now, there are 2 ways to become a Magiavander. Either come up with some new mind-blowing magic or rack up over 7,000 credits in this school. But let's keep it real, creating new magic is hella rare, so most students focus on earning credits. But since this is a remedial class, everyone in here is on the verge of flunking out, especially Willy. Once the classes wrap up, Kali links up with Willy and asks how he's holding up because Wagner's remedial classes are notorious for being strict as hell. Willy agrees that Wagner don't play around, but honestly, he's grateful that Wagner even bothers with remedial classes because most professors wouldn't give a damn. As they turn the corner, they catch some commotion going down, so they eavesdrop and hear Qian's crew giving him mad props for taking down the evil sentinel. They ain't questioning how he survived, but word is, when Mars woke up, all he saw was Qian standing tall next to a defeated evil sentinel. That means Qian must have straight up whooped its ass. Everybody is thinking Qian's the bomb for taking down that mega powerful evil sentinel. But deep down, Qian knows he's fronting because it was actually Willy who wrecked that monster. Just when Qian spots Willy strolling by, he takes that as a personal insult. So he marches up to Willy and starts throwing hands, trying to start a fight all over again. But now it's way harder for Qian to see Willy as some weakling because he knows Willy could straight up knock him out with one hit, but he's just choosing not to. Qian lets go of Willy's jacket and leaves, not saying a damn word. Once Qian's gone, Kali asks Willy what the hell went down between them because something definitely went down. At the same damn time, Edward busts into Headmistress Cauldron's office like he owns the place, demanding that Willy get expelled pronto. Cauldron asks why Edward suddenly wants to expel Willy out of the blue. He's already in his 6th and final year at the academy, so they can't just boot him for no reason. Edward trying to argue that Willy can't stay in the school because he is a warrior, not a mage, and he ain't having no one without magic trying to outshine the mages. Cauldron pulls out Willy's records and points out that his grades are off the charts, his writing is on point, and his magic reports are mad insightful. So he can't use magic, but he's the damn definition of a perfect student. If Willy's dream is to become a Magiavander, Cauldron believes he could excel in any damn profession he chooses. It is the Academy's duty to produce smart-ass folks for the fated day. But Edward is saying Willy's ambition to become a Magiavander is the problem, and Cauldron feeling him on that. So she comes up with a plan. She tells Edward to personally test Willy, and if Willy can't pass Edward's test, then he's free to kick him out if he wants. Edward asks if Cauldron is sure she want to leave Willy's fate in the hands of his #1 hater. And Cauldron says she's fine with it since it won't make a difference. If anything, she thinks it gonna be more entertaining to have the Dark Viper Mage himself test Willy. Meanwhile, Willy getting ready for his next class and asks Kali to help him pop open his locker. She happily does that, and he apologizes for always making her do it because he ain't got no magic skills. She's cool with it, but then she peeps Willy's sword in his locker and asks if he's still training with it. Willy says he is, but he couldn't get the green light to use it while he's at school and his roommate back in the dorm won't let him do anything risky. Later on, he and Kali roll to the library to study together, and Willy's going all in even though he already aced this shit before. Kali tells him to chill since he's already killing it in writing, but Willy says he gotta keep hustling because he can't afford to drop a single credit. Plus, he enjoys learning history from the perspectives of other races, especially because he can relate to the dwarves. They went to war against badass mages, but they never backed down despite the tough-ass challenge. Right then, Kali spots a white strand of hair on Willy's dome, and she says it's probably because he's pushing himself too hard. She offers to yank it out for him even though Willy says she doesn't have to. But she's really all about doing it. Just when they're getting flirty, Edward sneaks up behind Willy and tells him to meet him solo in the spell hall because he got some shit to handle. A little while later, Willy shows up at the spell hall, and Edward drops the bomb that he's hooking Willy up with a special remedial class, so he better be grateful. Willy can't believe Edward's offering him a remedial class, but that just proves he ain't up to no good. Dude wants to see what Willy's really made of, so he shoots a warning shot to let Willy know it's a damn serious. Edward says if Willy can land a single strike on him, he'll score 5 spell work credits. But if he fails, he's getting expelled on the spot. Edward also makes it clear that Willy can't say no to this test, so he starts casting a spell to take Willy out. Meanwhile, Cauldron summons Wagner to her office and apologizes for the short notice, but she thinks Wagner should know what Edward's up to. She casts a spell to show him the test Edward's giving Willy, and she forbids Wagner from interfering for any reason. She thinks it's only fair that Edward gets his request granted since Wagner got the same privilege to watch over Willy. But Wagner thinks it's too damn cruel to let Edward, of all people, be the one to test Willy because this dude almost became a Magiavander. He might have failed, but he's still got power equivalent to one, so Willy's in some serious danger right now. So far, Willy's been dodging Edward's spells, but Edward's only been using weak-ass black magic. Willy can't believe the insane power Edward's showing. Willy gotta find a way to fight back, so he tries sneaking up behind Edward and landing a kick, but Edward easily blocks it with a shield spell. That shield is too damn strong for Willy to break without a weapon, and Edward calls him hopeless for thinking a kick could penetrate a magic shield. Then Edward straight up blasts him away, and Willy starts to worry that there might be no way for him to win. Edward's just too damn strong for him right now. Edward tells Willie he'll limit himself to 2 spells, one for attacking with fire and one for defending against Willie's weak-ass moves. But even with just 1 attack spell, someone who's a master at that shit can outshine someone who's learned 1,000. At the same damn time, Edward's casting his fire spell, and Willie knows he's screwed if he gets hit with that. So he starts hauling ass, trying to run away, but Edward still manages to blast him no matter what. And you can tell Edward's enjoying this shit because he's got that smirk like he's conducting a symphony with Willie's screams. Willie eventually falls to the ground, realizing he can't beat Edward like this. But if he had his sword, at least he could hold his ground against Edward. Outside the spell hall, Collie's been stashing her stuff in her locker, and she's hella worried about Willie because Edward asking him to come alone for remedial classes can't be a good sign. Out of nowhere, Kiki comes running in all covered in Willie's blood, desperately trying to get to his sword in his locker. So Collie realizes some real messed up shit went down with Willie, and she pops open his locker so they can grab his sword and go help him out. As Willie's lying on the ground, Edward's strolling over to him, talking about how Willie ain't never gonna be a Magiavander if he can't top him right here. Magic always reigns supreme even back when dwarves were at war with the mages, fighting against an army of 10,000 dwarves. But just 1 mage was enough to wipe them all out. The sword ain't never gonna compare to the wand, but even with the odds stacked against him, Willie still wanna be a Magiavander, and he'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. Edward can't understand why Willie going to such extremes, so he asks if Willie got some noble-ass goal he trying to achieve. So Willie tells him it's because he wanna be by the side of the girl he loves, but Edward thinks that's a dumbass reason. It might sound stupid to Edward, but Willie made a promise to Wistoria, and he gonna do whatever it takes to watch the sunset with her. Right then, Collie shows up at the spell hall and tosses Willie's sword to him. And now that he's finally armed, Willie is able to counter Edward's fire spell. Edward all shocked that Willie managed to cut through his spell, but he realizes it's because Willie's sword is some special shit. Still, he is hell-bent on proving that Willie ain't no match for a mage. Willie is scared shitless of Edward's flames, and if he had a choice, he would have bounced from this fight long ago. But facing Edward is the only way for Willie to move forward. So he charges at Edward, dodging all his attacks, and now that he is close enough, he slices through Edward's barrier and scratches his cheek. Edward gotta admit that Willie passed the damn test, so he gives him his 5 credits and walks off. Willie collapses on the ground from exhaustion, and Collie runs up to congratulate him on his win, but he straight up passes out. Cauldron praised Willie's performance, and the analyzer Wagner said his strategy of diving into the attack to close the distance and attack from the blind spot was straight up brilliant. And what's even more impressive is that his sword strike was strong enough to break through Edward's shield. So maybe Willie got what it takes to be a Magiavander after all. Willie starts reminiscing about the time Wistoria took off for the tower. Before she left, he promised her he'd climb that tower one day even if he couldn't use magic. He swore he'd find a way to be with her, and when he did, they'd watch the sunset together. He made her that promise, and she replied with teary eyes and a smile, saying she'd always wait for him. Then she left, and Willie couldn't hold back his tears. He tells Professor Wagner, who's standing behind him, that this is gonna be the last time he cries like that. Next thing we know, we see Willie hustling, delivering newspapers in the city to make ends meet. He bumps into a dude named Dunnan who gives him some encouragement, saying he'll catch Willie at Gina's spot tomorrow. Willie keeps moving and almost trips on some stairs, but he manages to keep his balance and uses his OP skills to save the newspapers from falling except for one. He grabs that stray newspaper and starts reading it, only to find out that Wistoria did create 12 new types of magic spells. He thinks to himself that she's putting in that work, and it motivates him to do the same. Then he notices that Wistoria has placed an order with the academy. The scene switches to his dorm room where he asks Rosti if he can whip up a magic item for him. Rosti's wondering why he's in such a rush. While Willie changing his clothes, he tells him that Wistoria has put in an order, and he's going to skip classes to head into the labyrinth and gather ice cores from the frost walkers. He explains that she needs a bunch of magical catalysts, and the students will get paid for however many they can gather. He lets Rosti know that he's going to need that magic item so he can explore the 4th floor. So when Rosti sees the excitement in Willie's eyes, he can't say no. He hands him the magic item and mentions he's made some upgrades since last time. Willie thanks him, and before taking off, Rosti tosses him a piece of bread for breakfast. Later on, he explains how the mage Queen Mercedes once said that everything comes from the dungeon, and she encouraged everyone to conquer it by using their knowledge. So we got Willie making his way to the 4th floor of the dungeon, and he peeps a bunch of students going at it with the frost walkers. He figures it's all because of Wistoria's orders, and he's impressed by how she can rally so many folks with just one command. He spots Shin in the mix too, blasting the frost walkers with his fire spells. Shen's thinking these small-time enemies ain't gonna make him stronger, and he remembers how strong Willie was when he took on the Sentinel. Willie can sense Shen's power and his thirst for blood, and he knows he won't be able to score any frostwalkers in this spot, so he keeps going deeper into the dungeon and comes across some monsters attacking a female student. He swoops in and takes him out in a flash, so quick the girl can't even process what went down. She finally notices Willie and realizes what she saw wasn't magic, it was some badass sword play. Willie checks if she's alright, and she nervously says she's good. She thanks him for saving her, and he introduces himself. The girl introduces herself as Iris Churchill, a fourth-year student. Then the scene switches to Professor Wagner teaching a class at the academy, and we see a bunch of students skipping out because of Elfaria's orders. He tells the students that in this world, creating new magic is such a huge accomplishment that it lets the creator advance to the tower without any conditions. He explains that new magic often gets named after its creator, like the spell Dax Darbicans named after the ancient mage Darbicans. He tells the students that if they can create new magic, that'll leave their mark in history. The students think it sounds easy, but they know it ain't that simple. Rose brings up the news they read earlier about Elfaria creating 12 new spells, saying it must be mind-blowing. The professor says it's an unprecedented achievement that nobody else has done, and Elfaria might just be the greatest mage in the history of the Dan world because of it. The whole class starts wondering if this means ice magic is the top dog now, and they start thinking about joining the ice faction. Kali thinks Willie's childhood friend is amazing, and the whole academy's buzzing because of her. And Rose can't help but wonder if she's feeling jealous of Elfaria, because she's afraid Willie might be taken away by her. Kali gets all worked up hearing that, and the professor gives them a scolding for causing a commotion. Kali starts wondering if Willie went to the dungeon today just for Elfaria's sake. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon, Iris realizes that Willie's the bookworm with no magical skills she's heard about. Willie feels a bit offended by that, and he learns that Iris is a fourth-year student. He starts thinking if his lack of magic talent bothers her, but she tells him without a care that she can't look down on her savior. She says he might not be able to use magic, but he's got his own talent, and she respects that. Willie's confused by her laid-back attitude towards him, and he wonders if she's here because of Elfaria's orders too. Iris confirms it and says she wants to help out Magia Vander and do her part in holding up the sky. Willie explains that what Iris said ain't no exaggeration. He goes on to say that the folks in this world have never seen the real sky. The sky they see now is a massive barrier put up by the Magia Vander with their powerful magic. Legend has it that if the barrier falls, darkness will swallow the world and a catastrophe will begin. The students ain't just clearing orders from the tower because they admire the Magia Vander. They believe they're doing their part in holding up the sky. Then Iris tells him she's actually met Elfaria. She explains it happened when she was all alone in the dungeon, surrounded by monsters. Willie wonders if she's got a habit of getting surrounded by monsters. Iris says back then she was in a dire situation and had accepted her grim fate. But that Elfaria freezes all the monsters in an instant, helps her up, and tells her to be careful next time. Iris gets all excited remembering that, and she mentions with sparkling eyes that they had a long chat after that. That's when Kiki notices something, and Willie goes to check it out while Iris keeps rambling. She mentions she wants to help Elfaria, but she ain't found a single Frost Walker. She thinks maybe the other students already took them all down. Her searching ability ain't finding nothing either, so she asks Willie what he's up to. Willie tells Iris that Frostwalkers leave behind ice shards on their tracks, but usually those shards are like 0.5 to 1 millimeter in size. But my man notices a shard that's twice as big. He figures there's a massive Frostwalker up ahead, and maybe in a spot her searching ability can't reach. Iris is wondering how the hell Willie knows all this when he can't even use magic, and Willie tells her magic is cool and all, but it ain't everything, especially in a dungeon. He says he can make up for his lack of magic with his experience and wisdom. Then he gets his magic item ready to go. But suddenly Willie peeps that the Frostwalker is chilling on the freaking ceiling, and my man saves Iris when it tries to attack them. Turns out this ain't just any Frostwalker, it's a Frost Rex. And Iris breaks it down for us, saying these beasts are like advanced versions of Frostwalkers. The monster starts whirling at them, and Iris lets it slip that this bad boy is worth 6 credits, and it's the boss of the floor they are on. So if this monster starts throwing beams at them, but Willie is dodging them like a boss with Iris right beside him. Then he puts Iris down and tries to go head-to-head with the Frost Rex, but Iris stops him and says physical attacks don't work on that monster. She spills that this monster is also known as a dwarf killer and can freeze your ass with just one touch. But Willie, all confident and shit, tells her not to worry because he's beating this thing plenty of times before. The monster tries another beam attack, but Willie is dodging that shit too, and he slips under the monster. This beast can't find him, so it starts attacking all over the place. Iris and Kiki are dodging its wild swings. Meanwhile, Willie's magic item is sticking to the monster, and he uses the wire tied to it to wrap the thing up. And he explains the Frost Rex is weak against fire and explosions. The monster tries to freeze his ass, but Willie lights the wire on fire, which sets off the bomb tied at the end, and boom. The monster gets blown to pieces, and Willie thinks that Rossi's magic items are the real deal. Then Iris' whole vibe changes. She gets all serious and realizes there's a big difference between the rumors and what's really going on with this snow talent. She's wondering how the hell she should report all this, and Willie suggests they just bounce because they got what they came for. So Iris switches back to her happy self and agrees with him. The scene then cuts to Iris strutting into a room inside the tower called Mercedes Callas, and she's changing her look as she walks. We find out she was undercover in the academy to scout out talented magicians. She enters a room where 4 out of the 5 Magiavander are gathered. She wonders if she's interrupting something, but this dude named Carriot says it's all good because if the barrier was breached, the whole world would be toast by now. Ziu thinks the celestial hosts are peeping at them from the other side, but they ain't got the numbers or the strength to take them on. Eleanor says they need elite mages for the fated day or else all that lore will turn into reality. They ask the Watcher if she found anyone worth recruiting. Iris tells them that in her search, she found this no-talent dude who's actually worth bringing in. She explains his name's Willie. She suggests they bring him into the tower, but Carrie and Eleanor ain't too thrilled about inviting a no-talent in here. But Ziu finds this intriguing, and Eleanor says she doesn't want any more weaklings hanging around her. Zio tells her and Carrie they're being too rigid, and he says he even invited dwarfs to the tower if they're a badass fighter. Eleanor gets all heated because elves and dwarves don't exactly mix well, and she wonders how a dude like Zio even made it as a Magiavander. Carriot cuts off their squabbling and says there's no need to rush things. The Grand Magic Festival's almost here, and they can make a decision then. Zio agrees, saying talented folks should be able to make their way to the top of the tower on their own. If they can't, it means they ain't got the talent in the first place. He bounces because the meeting's over and the others follow suit. Elfaria is the last one left, and Iris tells her that the boy she mentioned is freaking amazing. Elfaria holds the magic core collected by Willie, and she says that she'll be waiting for him. As part of the next test, the students gotta participate in, they are all set to fight against golems. If you take one down, you pass. Then we see Chian and Kali are up first, and they both smash their golems like it's nothing. Meanwhile, Willie's struggling against his golem. Willie tries running behind the golem to land a solid punch, but as the students see him about to attack with his fists, they start clowning him for not using magic. This throws him off long enough for the golem to backhand him across the room. The students start leaving, satisfied with Willie's failure against his golem. But on the other end of the room, a few students are having no trouble with the golems at all. They're Lehanna and Wignall, and they both pass without a doubt. Then another student walks up and starts casting ice magic. With a wave of his wand, he sends icicle shards into all the golems, encasing them in solid blocks of ice. This is Julius, one of the top 3 students of the academy, along with the other 2. Lehanna gives props to Wignall and Julius for keeping up with her and not slacking off. Julius says he wants to declare a friendly war on them and will use his newly mastered ultimate technique to deliver their defeat when the time comes. As a token of his sincerity, he offers an ice rose to them, but neither Wignall nor Lehanna seem amused. Wignall, though, seems kinda excited for a showdown with Julius. These 3 are basically celebs at the school, each earning over 10,000 of the total 12,000 credits. Some think credits reflect a mage's power level, but Willie, he's nowhere near that. Right now, he doesn't even have enough credits to graduate in the first place, and this is his final year in the school. As Willie sits there, wondering what he's gonna do, Julius and his crew roll up and start trash-talking his lack of magic ability. Willie just steps aside to avoid trouble. As they leave, he hears them talking about the Grand Magic Festival, and he hadn't realized it was that time of year already. Later that day during lunch, Kali rolls up to Willie and tells him his only shot at becoming a Magiavander is to get noticed at the Magic Festival. Just trying to graduate based on his praxis and writing ain't gonna cut it, and there have been cases of students who got scouted without even having the 7,000 credits needed to graduate. The Magic Festival is a massive event that goes down every 2 years. It's packed with all kinds of events and pulls in high mages from the tower looking to scout out fresh talent. It's where all the different magic factions throw down for the chance to recruit the best students. It's no stretch to say that getting into the Upper Institute can pretty much hinge on how you do at the festival. There are 5 factions: the Thunder faction, the Elf faction, the Fire faction, the Ice faction, and Mysterious Noah. All these factions, except for Mysterious Noah, are led by their respective Magiavanders, so if they scout you, it's a guaranteed promotion. Willie doesn't think he's got a shot at getting chosen since he's already failing. To even get noticed, he'd need some kinda amazing magic that would blow the high mages away. And while he's right about that, there are still other ways to get scouted. Kali has heard rumors that Watchers might show up looking for talent, but Willie figures Watchers are just a fairy tale. He thinks that no talent like him's got no business at the festival, so he's planning to stay in the background and help with the preparations instead. Kali believes Willie could totally change how people see him if he entered the festival this year and showed what he's got, but Willie's still not into the idea. He thinks it'd just turn into a physical challenge if he's there. He tried entering the festival back in his second year and got booed off the stage for using physical attacks. He's still reeling from that embarrassment, so he's not keen on doing it again. Students all over the school are grinding hard for the festival, and Kali reminds Willy that besides the high mages, there will be plenty of scouts from the capital too. Even if Willy can't make it as a Mangiavander, he might still get scouted for another job. The Magic Festival is a prime spot to show off your skills, so Kali's really pushing Willy to step up and prove himself. But Willy's still doubtful about participating if he can't use magic. Just then, Kali spots something sketchy and heads over to one of the lockers, telling Willy there's something off about it. It's hidden pretty well, but she can sense a barrier there. Willy asks if she's sure it's not just a locking spell for the locker, but Kali can tell the barrier is made to block sound and obstruct sight. She could crack it with her magic, but that might be troublesome, so she asks Kiki to take care of it instead. Once Kiki breaks the barrier, they find a secret staircase behind the lockers that leads to an underground gambling den. A bunch of students are down there betting on who'll come out on top of the Magic Festival. Kali finds it messed up that the students turned their locker room into an illegal gambling ring, but then Willy notices Chien standing across from them. He's surprised to see him there since Chien doesn't seem like the type who enjoys betting. Chien gets defensive and starts yelling at Willy to mind his own business, but Kali steps in and warns Chien that if he starts a fight with Willy for no reason, she'll make sure he regrets it. Chien backs off, so Willy asks him again what he's doing here since he's not part of the betting crowd. Chien doesn't feel the need to answer Willy's questions, but it's definitely not like he's here to see if people are betting on him. And he definitely isn't upset that no one thinks he has a chance of winning, even though he's the fourth best student in the school. Sure, the top 3 students might have slightly more credits than him, but Chien's credit score is in the high 9,000s. The only reason he ranks lower is because he failed a writing test once. Since then, he's been working a lot harder to make up for the lost credits and catch up. But his magic skills are still on par with Lehana and the others, so he's just as likely to win at the festival as any of them, although he doesn't get why he's trying to justify himself to Willy. After that, the rest of the day goes on like usual. Once classes are over, Willy gets up to leave. But before he goes, then Kali catches him and asks if he's free after school because she'd love to hang out even if it's just going into the dungeon together. But unfortunately, Willy's got work tonight, so he can't hang with her today. Willy's working in Jenna's restaurant on the outskirts of town, hustling as a waiter. He's got a tray full of food and drinks, which he brings over to Danan. Danan's feeling bad for Willy. Dude's juggling a crazy schedule. Willy's at the crack of dawn delivering newspapers, spends his days in classes, and then wraps up his day working at Gina's spot. It's a tough life, but Willy's got no choice. He didn't score the school scholarship, so he's got to foot the bill himself. Danan mentions he heard the Grand Magic Festival is coming up soon and throws out the idea that Willy could participate. Willy's not having it, though he's not down for another round of public humiliation. Then Gina from the kitchen shouts at Willy to get back to work and calls out how Rosty's busting his ass harder than he is. Rosty's also working as a waiter tonight, but he's only doing it as a favor for Willy. It's a madhouse tonight since one of Gina's workers bailed, and all that extra work is going to pile up on Willy unless Gina hires someone else soon. When the dinner rush dies down, Willy and Rosty are elbow deep in dishes. Rosty asks Willy if he's really cool with working here because the pay from the dwarves isn't exactly top-notch. Willy could easily hit up Wagner to help him find a better-paying job, but he doesn't want to bother Wagner too much. Plus, he actually enjoys working here. The people are real, caring, and they treat him well, so Willy respects them a lot. Just when things are going smoothly, Julius rolls into the restaurant clearly just to be a jerk. The minute he walks in, he starts raving about the restaurant and the dwarves working there. Julius spots Willy and can't help but laugh, making nasty remarks about how a loser like Willy is only fit to hang out with barbarians like dwarves. This ticks Danan off, but the other dwarves hold him back. There's no way they can afford a clash with a mage. Julius goes on, threatening Danan not to pull any funny business. He then tells Danan and the other dwarves that they're just immigrants who ended up here after the Celestials wrecked their world. According to Julius, humans have been nice enough to let them live here without any hassle, so a dwarf like Danan has no right to give him any attitude. Danan manages to chill out because he knows there's nothing he can do right now. Everything Julius spat about dwarves being refugees is true. They came here after their world got wrecked. But even though the elves went through the same thing, dwarves still get treated like trash by the humans around here. So if Danan were to snap and go after Julius, it'd mean big trouble for all the dwarves in the city. That's just how things roll in this world, but Willy can't stand this kind of injustice. He decides today's gonna be his last shift here. Now that he's done working at Gina's place, he's free to do whatever he wants without Gina getting any blowback. First thing on his list, march over to Julius's table and tell him to take back the crap he said about the dwarves. Dwarves bust their butts and made the best of tough situations, so Julius has zero right to call them barbarians. Julius, however, couldn't care less about the dwarves or their struggles. He just kicks his plate of food at Willy and signals his two lackeys to get up and rough him up. They don't realize that tossing a plate counts as assault, so anything Willy does from now on is totally self-defense. Willy grabs the two guys by their shirts and introduces them to the floor in a major way. Julius catches a slice of the action and ends up getting his clothes pissed, which is a major hit to his pride. He's not about to let Willy get away with this. Things start to get icy as Julius pulls out his wand and goes on the attack. Willy has to dodge Julius's ice spells, but without his sword and trapped in a tight space, Julius eventually corners him with ice and pins him to the wall. Julius strides up, ready to freeze Willy solid, while Roasty's on edge, almost ready to jump in and save him. But Julius wants to see Willy beg for his life before he makes his move. Willy's eyes, though, show no fear, so Julius decides to switch things up. Instead of freezing Willy here, he's going to save the humiliation for the Magic Festival. He wants to make Willy look bad in front of the whole school. Willy agrees to face off with Julius at the festival, and Julius throws down the gauntlet. If he wins, Willy's out of school for good. But if Willy wins, he wants an apology from Julius for dissing all the dwarves. The day of the Grand Magic Festival finally arrives, and you can feel the buzz in the air. Everyone's hyped to see what these students are capable of. The Fire Faction Scout is on edge, telling his crew to keep an eye out for a rising star, because you never know who might have what it takes to become a Magiavander. The first big showdown is the Dragon Races, and Kali is absolutely killing it, leading the pack like it's nothing. But it's not just the race that's got people talking. The crowd is glued to the action, and there's a bunch of recruiters here too, both from the tower and beyond, all hungry to snag the top talent the school has to offer. Kali takes the win in record time as expected. And next up is Crown Attack, and it looks like Chan's getting in on the action. He's feeling pretty good, especially since Kali personally asked him to join her team. Finally, she's seen how awesome he is and wants to team up. No more dealing with that scrub, Willy. But just as Shin steps into the training room, he's floored to find Willy there too. Kali quickly clears things up, explaining that she needs both Chien and Willy on her team because Willy's credit score is so pathetically low that they need Chien's high score just to qualify for Crown Attack. Willy, trying to be nice, apologizes for driving Chien into his mess, but Chien isn't buying it. Why should he help Willy? And why is Willy even trying to jump into a high-level event like Crown Attack all of a sudden? While Chien's tearing into Willy, he notices that Willy isn't even paying attention to him. Instead, Willy's got his eyes locked on Julius, totally ignoring Chien's rant. Kali steps in, explaining that something went down between Julius and Willy, making Willy determined to compete in Crown Attack no matter what. This only fuels Chien's anger. How dare Willy ignore him after making him feel like such a loser in the dungeon? As the next event is about to kick off, the commentator Mike introduces himself, alongside his co-commentator Edward. Now Mike isn't thrilled about it because Edward's basically the most hated professor on campus, strict, scary, and just downright intimidating. Honestly, Mike's half convinced Edward might take him out before the festival's over, but hey, the show must go on. So Mike gets the crowd hyped for the main event of the day, the Crown Attack. Then a spell is cast over the stadium, transforming it into an epic battle map. There's a volcano zone, a marshland zone, a badlands zone, a grassland zone, and a wood zone. Unlike the other events, the Crown Attack is a team showdown, with squads of 3 competing against each other. All the teams start on the outer edge of the field, fighting their way to the central stadium. In the middle of the stadium sits a giant crown, and the first team to grab it wins. But don't think it's that easy. The entire field is rigged with traps of every kind. Teams can take the shortest path to the stadium, but they can also mess with the other teams along the way, so this is going to be the most intense battle royale of the festival. Edward chimes in, reminding everyone that the event was designed as a practical test of how well teams can handle a dungeon raid together. But let's be real, nobody's here for teamwork. They're all here to see the top students go head-to-head. And if by chance there were an illegal gambling ring at the school, which of course there totally isn't, Wignall's team would be the top bet. Meanwhile, on the other end of the betting spectrum, the team with the least love is the one led by Willy. The students start laughing at Willy for daring to think he could compete in an event like the Crown Attack, but Willy isn't losing confidence this time. As the participants head to their designated start locations, Wagner is shocked to see that Willy is serious about competing. He tries talking Willy out of it, but Willy's mind was made up from the beginning, so nothing Wagner says can stop him. Willy apologizes for not listening to Wagner, but even if it makes him the laughingstock of the school, this is one competition he's determined to win, no matter what. Willy then walks away, and Wagner accepts that there's no talking Willy out of this. He reminds Willy that he was warned about the risk involved, so if things go south, Willy has no one to blame but himself. With all the students in position, the Crown Attack event officially begins. As students rush forward, and Julius's team is the first to run into some of the traps laid out on the battlefield. As they approach, the cubes activate and form an army of golems standing in Julius's way. With so many golems in one place, it would easily become an insurmountable obstacle for many students. However, Willie charges forward at full speed, showing no signs of slowing down. The students mock him for trying to break through the golem swarm when he can't use magic and couldn't even beat a single golem during practice. But Willie keeps running toward the golems, and before he attacks, he signals to Kali, who casts a spell to create a magic gauntlet for him. With it, Willie absolutely demolishes all the golems in his path. The jaws of all the spectators drop as they witness Willie's capabilities, but Wagner had expected something like this to happen. As long as Willie attacks using a magic gauntlet, he can do significant damage, even without his sword. And since Kali made the gauntlet, it's technically not against the rules either. Against every prediction and all the illegal betting odds, Willie is the first to successfully make it through the golem horde, and he's heading straight for the crown now. Ever since Willie saved him, Qian's been haunted by that moment, replaying it in his mind on a loop. To him, it was one of his worst failures, and honestly, he'd rather have died than face that kind of humiliation. That's why he's been busting his ass to get stronger, pushing his body to the limit with every ounce of strength he can muster. But despite all his effort, Willie's still outclassing him, even without magic. Now in the crown attack, Willie and his crew have taken a massive lead, with the goal of reaching the stadium and snagging the crown. If the other competitors don't step it up, they're gonna be left eating dust. Willie hits the Badlands zone, and as soon as he arrives, more cube traps activate, firing rock bullets at him and his team. As the bullets rain down, Willie doesn't even flinch. He slams his gauntlet into the ground, creating a rock wall that blocks the bullets. Then, without missing a beat, he leaps forward and calls for Kali's help again. She casts a spell, summoning a dozen swords for Willie, which he uses like a pro, launching them as projectiles to obliterate the cubes in his path. Mike's hyped as he announces that Willie's team has breezed through the Badlands without breaking a sweat. Their teamwork is on point, though let's be real, Qian hasn't exactly been pulling his weight. The haters in the crowd, the ones who bet against Willie, try to downplay his skills, saying Kali's magic is doing all the work. Sure, her magic plays a role, but let's not forget, it's Willie's technique that makes those weapons lethal. Even the scouts are starting to take note of Willie's insane ability to detect and counter traps. And as much as Edward might not want to admit it, even he has to respect Willie's grind. All those hours Willie spent in the dungeons have honed his movements to near perfection, and his reflexes are so sharp he can exploit the tiniest openings. Meanwhile, one of the other teams, too caught up in their hate for Willie, ends up falling right into a flower trap and gets eaten alive. The other teams are struggling with the same traps along the path, but despite all the brutal obstacles, Willie and his team are still holding the lead. The tournament events are causing a huge stir at the stadium, so much so that even Julius, who's not even nearby, can hear the commotion. Curious, he asks his teammates for an update on the event's progress. They quickly cast a detect spell to check on the competition. Turns out, Willie is way out in front with a massive lead. Julius's team knows they need to act fast or Julius might actually lose. But Julius doesn't seem too fazed. He's already got a plan in mind to deal with Willie personally. Meanwhile, Willie and his crew have just reached the final area before the arena, Enchanted Woods. Willie is leading the charge and triggers a bunch of magic circles all at once and quickly realizes he's caught in a chain circle trap. But Willie's not sweating it. He's already got the perfect counter up his sleeve. If all these spells are about to go off together, he'll just make them take each other out. He starts carving around each magic circle, adding a twist to them, and sure enough, he gets the spells to fire at each other and explode. Mike excitedly announces that Willie has breezed through the forest traps like it was nothing. He can't resist poking at Edward, asking if he has any thoughts since Edward was the mastermind behind that dark magic minefield. But Edward just clicks his tongue, clearly annoyed that Willie managed to slip through his trap so easily. Despite all the momentum Willie's built up with his massive lead, the closer he gets to the stadium, the more likely it is he'll run into another team looking to take him down. He's already taken out a couple of teams, but there's one team he's got his sights on. Willie plans to rush ahead and set up an ambush for Julius. But as he's making his way to secure the high ground, the tables turn on him as out of nowhere Julius hits him with an icicle. Willie's fine, the shot didn't hit him directly, but he's baffled. How the hell did Julius get here so fast after the huge lead they had? And the fact that Julius is alone only makes things worse. Willie's now on high alert, knowing Julius's teammates could be lurking, ready to spring a trap of their own. Julius starts launching a barrage of icicles at Willie, leaving Willie no choice but to bail for now. He knows he needs to get serious and take Julius down. But then Qian decides it's time to turn up the heat, literally. He starts casting an insanely powerful Inferno spell, but Kali notices that Qian's got his eyes locked on Willie a little too much and warns him that Qian might be aiming for him. As Qian unleashes the spell, Kali quickly throws up a rock wall in front of Willy to keep him from getting roasted. The blast sends a massive shockwave across the battlefield, leaving Willy momentarily dazed. When he snaps back to reality, he realizes the forest around them has been completely torched. Qian strolls up to him, casually saying that Julius was in the way. He might have taken Julius out too, but Kali's sure Qian fired that spell with one target in mind, killing Willy. Kali demands to know what Qian thinks he's doing, but Qian feels totally justified. He played along with Kali's request and joined their team just so Willy could enter the event. Now the wants that favor repaid with a one-on-one showdown. Willy's baffled, asking why Qian suddenly wants to fight and why right now of all times. But Qian isn't in the mood to explain. He just fires a warning shot at Willy. Kali tries to step in and stop the madness, but before she can, Julius is somehow still alive after that fiery blast and blocks her with a wall of ice. With Kali in trouble, Willy wants to rush to help her, but Qian's not letting him go anywhere until he gets the fight he's itching for. He blasts some fireballs at Willy, knocking his sword out of his hand. Willy tries to talk some sense into Qian, suggesting they settle this another time, but Qian's having none of it. He demands Willy pick up his sword for a duel, and with no other choice, Willy agrees to face him. Many years ago, when Willy and Qian first started their student life at the academy, Willy was the most pitiful, pathetic kid you could find. He was a magnet for bullies who stuck notes on his back labeling him as worthless. Qian couldn't stand the sight of it and decided to step in, albeit in his own twisted way. He burned the note, then told Willy that he'd graciously allow him to become his underling so he wouldn't have to feel alone and useless all the time. But Willy, with a blank stare, simply ignored him and walked away, which pissed Qian off to no end. Even then, Qian followed him, shaking him and demanding an answer. Willy, his eyes empty and devoid of any spark, told him to let go, and Qian begrudgingly obeyed. As Willy walked away after hurting Qian's ego, Qian's feelings turned to hatred. Now he unleashes his rage, attacking Willy with fire spells that scorch the forest. Willy runs, dodging and hiding behind trees, but Qian's relentless attacks track him down, forcing him out into the open. Qian lashes out with a fire whip, and as Willy tries to fend it off, another whip snaps from behind, grabbing his leg. Just as he cuts through the whip to free himself, Qian hurls another powerful spell at him. Willy manages to block it, but his sword starts glowing red-hot from the heat. Qian curses him, sneering, "Are you just going to jump around to survive, or do you plan on fighting back?" Willy, still unwilling to fight his teammate, insists, "We're on the same team. I don't have time to fight you right now, I'm focused on the competition." Qian snaps and tells Willy that he will just burn him to ashes and continues his assault. As Willy dodges everything thrown at him, he can't help but wonder if he really has no choice but to fight against his own teammate. Everyone in the stadium is completely floored by what they're seeing. Even Edward, with a smug grin, points out that no matter the reason, infighting among teammates is the absolute worst move in this competition. He mentions that because of this shit, the Tower Scouts will undoubtedly mark both Willy and Qian negatively, and he looks weirdly happy about it. The Scouts had seen some promise in Qian up until now, but after witnessing this fiasco, they decided he's unfit for recruitment. Meanwhile, Willy's roommate Roasty is killing himself with worry when suddenly Iris appears and asks if she can sit next to him. They've crossed paths before, and Rusty can hardly believe it when Iris starts cheering for Willy. She admits that she wasn't interested in him at first, despite a reliable source hyping him up, but after watching him in action, she's become his biggest fan. On the other side of the battlefield, Kali is desperately trying to evade Julius while searching for a way to reach Willy and Qian. Julius mocks her, asking if the so-called Earth Princess is really not going to fight back. Kali hates that nickname with a passion and snaps at him to stop calling her that. He responds by launching an ice attack, which she blocks with a stone wall. But then she noticed a magic circle forming beneath her feet, and she realized that she walked right into a trap. Then a massive blast of dark magic hits her point blank, leaving the audience in shock. But what really blows everyone's minds is that Julius appears on every screen, facing off against all the teams at once, and nobody can make sense of how he's seemingly everywhere at once. Julius even makes his way over to Wignall's team, reminding Wignall that he swore to crush everyone with his secret weapon. Wignall responds with a spell Julius knows all too well, an ice flower that he had once given him. As the flower distracts Julius, a magic circle forms beneath him, and suddenly, he's swallowed up by a tornado. But then it's revealed that this Julius was nothing more than a clone, crafted from ice and magic stones, which is obliterated by Wignall's attack. Everyone is in awe of Wignall's performance, but Philvis, one of the leaders of the elf faction, isn't impressed. To her, Wignall is just average, barely meeting their standards. She turns to her partner Lefia and asks to return to their base, complaining that as an introvert, the festival's lively atmosphere feels like a slow, painful poison. Lefia, however, refuses, reminding her that they must watch the entire festival and report back to their master, the elf Magiavander. Meanwhile, the audience is buzzing, unsure who will take the win now. They thought that Willy's team would win it, but Shen's sabotage has thrown everything into chaos. Willy's classmates are baffled by Shen's actions, and even Willy himself can't figure out why the redhead is so obsessed with him. He recalls the days when everyone bullied him, disrupting his work just for laughs. It was a rough time because no one knew better than him that he was a failure, but he couldn't understand why they went out of their way to torment him. Numbed by the constant harassment, all he wanted was to be left alone. So when Shen approached him that day, all he could say was, "Let me go." He didn't grasp Shen's intentions, nor did he care. His focus was solely on reaching Elferia. On that day, when Willy ignored him, Shen had lashed out with a fireball in frustration. Now here he was again, attacking Willy in the same way. Willy dodges his attacks, opting to run instead. Shen, not backing down, chants a high-level magic spell and conjures a flame falcon, his guardian. Willy is shocked not just by the sight of it, but even more so when Shen commands the falcon to attack. Guardians are usually defensive, meant to buy time, not go on the offensive. Reacting quickly, Willy uses his sword as a platform to leap into the air, slicing off one of the falcon's wings in the process. He grabs his sword and rushes towards Shen, thinking this is his chance to end the fight. But the flame falcon quickly regenerates its wing and resumes its pursuit. Willy realizes he has to destroy the falcon's core to stop it, but that's easier said than done with the guardian shooting fire at him. He dodges the flames, only for Shen to attack from another direction. Willy blocks with his magic gauntlet, but is pushed back, clearly exhausted. But Shen isn't looking much better either. Everyone, including Edward, is blown away by Shen's unexpected performance, because commanding a guardian with such skill shows that he's way beyond your average student. Even the Fire faction scouts are intrigued despite Shen's betrayal of his team. According to their data, Shen wasn't supposed to be on the same level as the top 3 students in this batch, but today's display has everyone rethinking that assessment. The scout leader is convinced that something must have pushed Shen to break through his limits, and he decides to report this to Flame Magiavander immediately. On the battlefield, Willy is down on his knees, realizing just how much stronger Shen has become. Shen taunts him, asking if this is really all he's got, reminding him that he was much stronger when he fought the giant monster. Willy, desperate to understand, asks why Shen is doing all of this. They have no reason to fight each other. Shen snaps and demands how Willy can say that after everything that's happened between them. He accuses Willy of having no anger, no hatred, even after all the bullying he's endured over the years. Willy admits that he's angry and that he does hate Shen, but he insists that right now, their priority should be defeating Julius. The mention of Julius sends Shen into a rage, cursing Willy for always focusing on everything and everyone except him. He tells Willy to stop ignoring him. And in that moment, Willy finally understands. He realizes that Shen, in his own twisted way, has acknowledged him and now desperately wants to be acknowledged in return. Willy puts on his action glasses and takes a stance determined to honor Shen's feelings by giving him everything he's got. Shen, seeing Willy finally taking him seriously, is thrilled. So he begins chanting his most powerful spell with the Flame Falcon guarding him. Willy knows he can't get through his attack with any weak-ass attacks, so he decides to watch Shen, closely timing his spell and preparing for the perfect moment to launch his counterattack. But suddenly, Shen unleashes his guardian to attack as he shoots a barrage of fireballs that light up the battlefield. Willy's eyes widen at the sheer scale of the attack, but he quickly zeroes in on the path of the fireballs. With a burst of speed, he weaves through the onslaught like it's child's play, emerging from the flames to deliver a precise slash to the Flame Falcon's core before heading to Shen. Shen then attacks in with another attack point blank, but just as their attacks are about to collide, a stone wall erupts between them, halting the fight in its tracks. Willy smacks right into the wall, and Shen, caught off guard, stumbles back as Kali steps onto the scene and demands they stop fighting. Her clothes in tatters from her battle with Julius, and she proudly announces that she kicked Julius' ass, but that he pulled a vanishing act. Shen, caught off guard, stammers something about decency, blushing as he scolds Kali for her disheveled appearance. She isn't having any of it, calling him a misogynistic pig for judging her by her clothes and reminding him that the whole mess is his fault for starting the fight in the first place. She then tells Willy to get moving because he's got unfinished business with Julius, and she'll handle things here. Shen, still riled up, declares he won't let her interfere with his battle, but Kali snaps back, calling him selfish and stupid. Then suddenly Willy drapes his robe over her shoulders, thanking her with a sincerity that leaves her blushing furiously. Willy then picks up his sword and takes off, telling Shen they'll settle the score some other time. Meanwhile, Julius and his team are the first to enter the stadium. The host is already declaring them the unbeatable champions when suddenly, Willy rockets into the stadium at breakneck speed. landing with a thunderous crash right behind Julius and his crew, leaving the entire crowd eyes wide in disbelief. Willie locks eyes with Julius and challenges him to a fight, and Julius, who's been itching for this showdown, smirks as he prepares for the battle he's been waiting for. The scene then shifts to Elfaria lounging in her room at the top of the tower when a woman named Sarissa storms in to talk to her. Sarissa quickly notices that Elfaria is actually dozing off and doesn't hesitate to wake her up with a smack to the head, and tells her to act with the dignity befitting her status, and points out that Elfaria is always either napping or daydreaming at the bottom of the tower. Then, with a groggy irritation, Elfaria asks Sarissa what she wants. Sarissa hands her a stack of papers, insisting she take a moment to review them. These are the candidates recommended by the scouts, and Sarissa mentions with satisfaction that they've got a good crop this year. She highlights Julius in particular, noting that he's an excellent fit for the Ice faction and currently putting on a show in the games. Sarissa suggests he might even be worthy of becoming Elfaria's successor. Elfaria considers that Sarissa might be right if the information about Julius is really accurate. The scene then shifts to Willie gearing up to face off against Julius in the games. Mike, the ever-enthusiastic announcer that Willie is up against all three members of Squad 9, and Julius, with a smug grin, expresses his relief that Willie showed up on time. He admits he was worried he'd win by default, then adds with a smirk that it wouldn't have been as satisfying if he couldn't crush him with some public humiliation. Willie, not backing down, tells Julius he's not planning on losing until he makes him apologize to Donnan and the others. But Julius, with a sneer, dismisses Willie as all talk and no action, saying he's nothing more than a rat. Then, with a flourish, Julius starts showing off his ice magic, creating a thick mist that quickly envelops the arena. Willie, on high alert, tries to sense the magical presence of the others through the smokescreen. He wonders if they're planning to launch spells at him, and quickly realizes they're moving around him, likely attempting to encircle him. Then suddenly an ice spell strikes Willie from behind, but Willie narrowly dodges it. Knowing he can't stay in one place, he begins to move, managing to evade two more similar ice attacks. Believing he has now pinpointed their locations, Willie attempts to strike at Julius, but just as he makes his move, he's blindsided by yet another ice attack from an unexpected direction. Willie is caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, and Julius, with a smug grin, reveals that neither he nor his team has moved an inch. The realization hits Willie like a ton of bricks. What he's been tracking were mere clones, and the entire arena is left in shock as 5 versions of Julius stand before them. Willie briefly wonders if it's some kind of illusion, but quickly realizes it's not. Julius then explains with a wicked laugh that his clones aren't just for show, they can explode. And then boom, the clone closest to Willie explodes, and while Willie manages to shield himself from the worst of the blast, he finds himself trapped in a block of ice. Even Edward is stunned by the sight of 4 identical Juliuses, and he's taken aback when he realizes the spell being used. Wagner then identifies the spell as one of Elfaria's secret creations, part of a legendary serial magic known as El Glace Frost. Wagner goes on to explain that Elfaria's genius lies in the 12 original spells she crafted, each one a masterpiece in its own right, and Julius is wielding one of these spells called Ars Weiss. Willie recognizes the spell immediately. It's one that creates living sculptures, perfect replicas of the caster. Willie is in disbelief and demands to know how Julius could possibly use the same magic as Elfaria. Julius just laughs, arrogance dripping from every word as he claims it's all thanks to his immense talent. He boasts about mastering the spell on his own, and while it might be just the first in the series, he brags that he's already reached the level of a Mangiavander. With a sneer, he dismisses Elfaria as nothing special, even going so far as to declare that one day he'll strip her of everything she has. Willie's anger flares at this insult, and he shatters the ice, imprisoning him, and charges straight at Julius. So Julius and his clones respond with a barrage of ice boulders, but Willie cuts through them with ease. As Julius continues to cast spells, he boasts that he can move his clones at will and even have them cast spells independently. Julius's teammates then confidently remark that Willie is bound to lose if he stays put, and with that, Julius halts his direct attacks and uses his clones as anchors to trap Willie within a magical barrier. Willie tries to break free of the barrier, slashing at it desperately, but the barrier holds firm, leaving him trapped. Julius then with a smug explains that it's easy to hunt down a wild animal when it's on a rampage, and he then hurls a massive ice boulder at Willie, declaring that this will end the fight. The crowd in the arena is stunned by the display of power, and Mike announces that Julius has won the battle without even moving from his spot. Even Edward is in awe and comments that this level of control is the ideal for all mages, so he finally understands why Julius has over 10,000 credits. Julius then grabs his wand and uses it like a Mick, and he tells the scouts that he has mastered Elfaria's spell on his own. Then he boldly declares that he will be Elfaria's successor, leaving the students in amazement. They murmur that no one can defeat him if he can wield the magic of Mangiavander. But Iris sees through the act, and she points out that Julius has cleverly exploited Willie's monstrous strength and agility to make himself look good. She acknowledges his cunning, but Rosie says that he'll look ridiculous if he loses now. And then, against all odds, Willie shatters the ice boulder and Julius is left speechless. Willie casually thanks Julius for the ice spell, saying it helped cool his head. He even admits that he tends to get worked up when it comes to Elferia, but Julius gets irritated to hear him babbling, and he declares that he's going to put Willie down for good this time. So Julius and his clones launch another attack, but Willie deftly dodges their spells and takes out Julius's teammates in one swift move. Edward, recognizing the tactic, realizes this is the same technique Willie used against him. The crowd erupts in excitement, sensing a major upset. As Julius's ice clones begin to crumble, confusion spreads through the audience. Willie calmly explains that Julius had been relying on his friends to help control the clones, and that's the only reason he could wield Elfaria's spell for even a short time, and he adds that Julius is nowhere near Elfaria's level. Meanwhile, back at the tower, Elfaria, watching from afar, considers that Julius might indeed have the potential to be her successor if the reports are accurate, but she quietly muses that what she truly desires by her side is a sword, not a successor. Willie then points out that Julius's Ars Weiss isn't all it's cracked up to be. He explains that unlike autonomous guardians, Ars Weiss is entirely controlled by the caster, and without his teammates, Julius wouldn't have been able to keep those clones in check. Julius, enraged at being lectured by someone he considers a no-talent who can't even use magic, retaliates by launching roses at Willie. Willie easily slices through them, but Julius makes the roses explode. Willie shields himself from the blast, and Julius, not missing a beat, conjures up 4 more clones. And they bombard Willie with magic from all sides, but Willie either dodges or counters every attack. Julius admits that he's not yet skilled enough to control 4 clones simultaneously without the help of his teammates, and he knows that the spell will drain him quickly, but he remains confident that Willie will never figure out which of the clones is the real one since they all look identical. Laughing at the thought of Willie being helpless against his spell, Julius is caught off guard when Willie charges straight at him. Panicked, Julius hastily erects an ice wall to block the attack, but Willie shatters it effortlessly with his sword, sending a shard of ice flying into Julius. Julius is stunned and demands to know how Willie figured out which one was the real him. So Willie calmly explains that the average body temperature of Ars Weiss's clones is the exact opposite of the caster's, around -36 or 37 degrees Celsius, and sometimes even lower depending on the precision of the spell. If a caster isn't fully in control of the clones, the cold seeps out of them, much like Frostwalker's ice crystals from around their feet. Realizing that Willie is right, Julius watches in disbelief as all of his clones crumble to pieces. Confusion and anger swirl within him as he wonders how someone like Willie could possibly know more about this spell than he does. So Willie, with a hint of nostalgia, reveals that it's because Elfaria is his childhood friend. He shares that both he and Elfaria were abandoned and grew up in the same orphanage, and because of this, he knows her magic inside out and even admires it, though he's never been able to reach her level. Then we see Elfaria call down to Willie from the tower, reassuring him that their memories and his hard work will never go in vain. Back on the ground, Willie faces Julius and calmly tells him that he knows all the strengths and weaknesses of Elfaria's magic. Julius snaps and angrily declares that he's not about to let a no-talent like Willie mock the magic of Amandia Vander. With fury in his eyes, he attacks Willie with an ice spell, but Willie effortlessly slices right through it. He then compliments Julius, sarcastically noting how amazing it is that no other mage has ever managed to replicate Elfaria's magic before. But then Willie drops the bombshell. Ars Weiss, the spell Julius is so proud of, was created by Elfaria when she was just 2 years old. This revelation hits Julius like a knife in his ass, but Willie continues anyway and tells him that the spell isn't perfect and can be easily countered. He adds that bragging about mastering such a spell makes Julius nothing more than the proverbial naked king. Julius is now in disbelief that he had been so proud of mastering a spell created by a 2-year-old girl and feels the sting of humiliation. The realization that he's no better than an infant enrages him, and in his fury, he conjures 8 clones of himself. And then he boasts that Willie shouldn't underestimate him, as he can do much more than just create a few clones. So he is determined to overwhelm Willie with sheer numbers, and he casts a barrage of ice spells at once. But Willie remains unfazed and casually mentions that when he was a kid, he used to get bullied by 10 of Elfie's clones, making Julius's efforts look like child's play. Julius is enraged and launches his attack, but Willie dodges every spell with ease and takes down one of his clones. Julius desperately commands his remaining clones to stop Willie, so he can flee, but it's no use. Willie methodically destroys every last clone, as their attacks prove useless as he blocks or dodges them all. With the clones defeated, Willie strides toward Julius and delivers a powerful punch to his face. The blow is so strong that it knocks out one of Julius's teeth, leaving him unconscious on the ground. Everyone is stunned by what just happened, and Mike announces Willie's victory, but he is in disbelief that his so-called no talent managed to take down someone with over 10,000 credits. Rusty is left speechless, and even Lehana starts to see Willie in a new light. And as Kali and Shen enter the area, Mike declares that all Willie needs to do now is claim the crown. But just as Willie is about to reach for it, Wignall swoops in, snatches it, and places it on his own head. The crowd is left in shock, and Mike has no choice but to announce Wignall as the winner. And with that, the Grand Magic Games come to a close. Then we see Sarissa breaks the news to Elfaria, who is so ashamed that she can't even show her face. She desperately wishes for a spell that could erase memories or turn back time. Sarissa mentions that such a forbidden spell might exist, but she wouldn't allow Elfaria to use it anyway. Elfaria, with tears in her eyes, insists that Willie was wrong. She wasn't trying to bully him, she just wanted him all to herself so they could play together all the time. So she can't believe the students now know about her dark past. Meanwhile, back at the arena, Shen is floored that Willie managed to take down Julius too, so he leaves with the determination to defeat Willie someday, and then Kali checks on Willie, asking if he's okay. Willie apologizes for their loss, but he adds that at least he was able to keep his promise. That night at the tavern, the atmosphere was buzzing with joy as everyone celebrated Willie's victory over Julius. The dwarves all thanked Willie for standing up for them, while Wagner expressed his gratitude to the dwarves for looking after Willie. The dwarves modestly claimed they hadn't done much, but Wagner insisted they keep an eye on Willie anyway. Later that night, Kali couldn't hide her disappointment about Willie not getting scouted by the tower. She guessed it was because their team had been too busy fighting among themselves and hadn't even won the event. She placed the blame squarely on Shen, and Willie mentioned that Shen had rudely turned down the invitation to join their celebration. Donnan reassured Willie, saying not to fret about not being scouted. After all, he had fought for their honor and secured the apology Willie had been after. And the cherry on top, Julius was stuck doing grunt work in the tavern as punishment. He obediently followed his boss's orders, but couldn't help but complain that he wouldn't get scouted now, all thanks to no talent Willie. Frustrated, Julius threw himself into the work, trying to burn off his anger. Meanwhile, Kali noticed Wagner seemed troubled, and he confessed that things might change from here on out. Willie had shown what he was really made of during the festival, and Wagner wondered how Willie would handle things when he returned to the academy the next day. Kali optimistically assumed that the other students would finally show Willie some respect, but Wagner warned her that things might not go as expected. When they got back to school, a group of guys immediately asked Willie to join them for a dungeon run. They grudgingly admitted that Willie had insane strength and begged him to choose their team for the upcoming Praxis, a week-long dungeon dive. Before Willie could respond, another group barged in, not wanting the first group to snatch Willie away since they had planned to invite him to their team. More students joined in, and soon Willie was surrounded by requests to team up. Kali called them all shameless for suddenly wanting Willie after years of bullying him. She assumed Willie would feel the same, but she was dead wrong. Willie was thrilled to be in demand. Kali realized she'd lost her grip on him because he'd been starved for friends for too long. When one girl accused Kali of hoarding Willie all to herself and offered to split the dungeon dive credits, Kali stepped in, declaring that Willie couldn't team up with anyone because they already had plans to go shopping. That night, Kali starts freaking out after realizing she might have accidentally set herself up for a date with Willie. Her friend Rose catches on and can't help but tease her about it, but still suggests Kali get ready, even if it's not a real date. Kali reluctantly agrees, and Rose nudges her to wear something cute. Meanwhile, Willie is talking to Rosie about his plans with Kali, explaining that Kali kind of strong-armed him into it by saying they needed to buy gear for the Praxis. Rosie is happy to hear that Willie and Kali will be out shopping alone, and his face lights up like a total weirdo. The next day, Kali is anxiously waiting for Willie, determined to turn this little shopping trip into a full-blown date. Her breath catches when she sees Willie, and he immediately compliments her new look, saying she got his heart racing, which sends Kali into a bit of a panic. Just as things start to feel right, they're both caught off guard when Rosti suddenly shows up, apologizing for being late. He introduces himself to Kali, and Willie explains that Rusty insisted on tagging along. Kali is horrified at this sudden twist, while Rosti just smirks, clearly enjoying her discomfort. From that point on, Rosti seems dead set on getting in between Kali and Willie anytime she tries to talk to him. Eventually, Willie notices something's up and asks what's bothering Kali. She bluntly tells him that the way he and Rosti are all buddy-buddy is kind of weird. Willie just laughs it off, saying Rosti is a great guy who likes to stick close to his friends. Rosti, ever the troublemaker, brings over drinks but conveniently doesn't get one for himself, planning to share with Willie. Kali isn't having any of that nonsense and offers to share hers instead. Things start getting tense, and Rosti suggests that Willie go on ahead to get his sword fixed. Kali agrees, adding that the dwarves wouldn't be thrilled to see mages like them at their forge. Clueless to the tension, Willie shrugs and heads off the forge. As soon as he's out of sight, Kali cuts to the chase, demanding to know why Rosti won't just leave Willie alone for 5 minutes. Rosti doesn't back down and declares that he cares about Willie more than anyone else in the world. The two end up going head-to-head, bickering over who's actually closer to Willie. Back with Willie, he finally starts to wonder if his friends might actually hate each other. Just then, out of nowhere, Lehana swoops in to talk to him. Lehana, also known as Miss Perfect, is someone who stands way above the crowd, and a complete opposite of Willie in every sense. Willie's a bit puzzled, wondering what she could possibly want, but Lehana simply tells him to follow her. He trails behind her all the way to some mysterious house, where he finds a group of the academy's top students gathered. It's the final term of their last year, which means it's time for the all-student praxis, and Lehana drops the bombshell that she wants to form a party with the 5 of them. Julius and Shen look like they've just seen a ghost and can't fathom why Lehana would invite Willie of all people. Willie knows all too well that these two probably hate him the most. Seeing his terrified face, Lehana mistakes it for hesitation and assumes he's turning down her offer, confirming to Willie that she's a bit of an airhead. Not one to be ignored, Shen furiously charges over to confront Willie. But before he can make a scene, Wigmel flexes his powerful magic and completely changes their surroundings. He smilingly points out that mages are far from the barbaric nature of the dwarves, which shuts Shen up real quick. Wigmel's magic is no ordinary trick. It's illusion magic, a rare form that conjures up fantastical landscapes, a skill only the elves possess. As things settle down, Wigmel turns his attention back to Lehana, wanting to hear what else she has to say. Lehana then explains that her goal is simple, to form a party for the dungeon dive. She wants to team up with the 4 strongest mages and the one person who stood out the most at the festival. She believes Willie has something they lack, something that could give them an edge in the dungeon. Julius immediately disagrees, arguing that Willie can't use search magic and would just slow them down. Shen, having recently been in a party with Willie, is quick to say he doesn't want to go through that mess again. Wigmel chimes in, pointing out that Julius and Shen are just bitter about losing to Willie, but Willie still feels insulted. Wigmel spells out what they refuse to see. Willie has the brute strength of a dwarf and the agility of a beast. Sure, his fighting style might not be elegant, but his swords still manage to beat both of their wands. Julius isn't having it and snaps back that Wigmel is still trailing behind Lehana in credits. Wigmel takes this as even more reason to respect Lehana's judgment. If she sees potential in Willie, then he's willing to respect this so-called no talent. That's more than can be said for the 2 other guys, which of course gets them even more riled up. Lehana then drops her real reason. She wants to harness all their power to rise up the tower as the top student. She craves fame, honor, and a brighter future. Although she got scouted at the festival and secured a guaranteed placement after graduation, that's not nearly enough for her. In her family, members tend to die young, and to prevent their downfall, Lehana needs to produce extraordinary results. Simply climbing the tower isn't sufficient. She has to become a Magia of Vander. Confident that everyone has their own ambitions, Lehana proposes a deal. Drop a coin in a cup if they agree to her plan. Wigmel doesn't hesitate. There's no way any other team could achieve better results. Julius, desperate for more credits, reluctantly agrees, and Shen throws in his coin too, leaving Willie as the last holdout. Later that night, Willie returns to his worried friends. They had gone looking for him at the forge, but he was nowhere to be found. Looking unusually serious, Willie tells them that he has decided to join Lehana's party for the practice dungeon dive. The next day, Wagner explains that the practice run will kick off in 10 days. Floors 7 through 10 of the dungeon, which were previously off-limits, are going to be unlocked. This means students will get to face off against level 5 enemies and other high-credit monsters. It's the one chance for students to rack up over 1,000 credits in a single go, so yeah, it's a pretty big deal. But the real jackpot: if they manage to take down any of the floor keepers, they'll earn a massive amount of credits. In theory, they might even secure all their praxis credits in one fell swoop. Edward jumps in with a reality check, warning that there's also a very real chance they could lose their lives. Just last year, 4 students were eaten by monsters. He reminds everyone that playing the hero is a terrible idea and that reckless behavior is strictly forbidden. Even though professors will be stationed nearby, that hasn't stopped fatalities before. As the students head into the dungeon, Lehana makes it a point to tell Kali she was never invited. Kali shrugs it off, declaring that if Willie's going, she's going too. Rosti couldn't make it, but Willie is glad that Rosti at least geared him up with a load of magical items. The practice is about to kick off, and students are informed that there are base camps on each floor. They're told that if the lower levels become too dangerous, they should hightail it to safety immediately. With that, the praxis officially begins, and Willie puts on his battle goggles, ready for action. Meanwhile, deeper in the dungeon, someone is given a secret mission to retrieve something. Another figure is there too, and with cold efficiency. This person gruesomely removes a person's head from their body. The scene then cuts to one of Cariad's subordinates informing him that the date for the all-student praxis has been decided. Cariad, annoyed, tells him there's no need to bother him with every minor detail and grumbles that he doesn't like being the representative of the Vanders, even temporarily. However, the subordinate Logwell insists there is no other Vander better suited for the role. Cariad then asks if their king still hasn't returned and learns that he hasn't, so he thinks this is not good, as the barrier is already on the verge of disappearing. Back at the dungeon, everyone rushes in as the all-student practice begins. Willie is determined to make his mark and reach Elfaria. Then, at Lehana's request, Wignall uses his wind magic to propel their party forward, and they descend to the next floor, but Wignall cushions their descent with a gentle burst of wind magic. They attempt to move ahead, but encounter an entire swarm of crimson ants, so Willie thinks it's his time to shine, knowing that mages are weakest in close-range combat. But just as he prepares to act, Wignall stops him, asking if he knows what Lehana's family is known for. At that moment, Lehana charges at the monsters with lightning-fast speed, swiftly taking them all out using her lightning magic. And after she finished the ants, Wignall explains that the Wenzas is a family of knights and Lehana is a rare type of mage who specializes in close combat magic. Lehana then tells the group it would be troublesome to compete with other parties for credits, so they need to get at it quickly. Willie then recalls that Professor Wagner once asked him if he knew which magic is the most important in the dungeon. Since Willie didn't know the answer, Wagner had explained that it's search magic, a common spell used to detect enemies and anomalies. For mages who venture into dungeons, it's the most basic and essential spell. Back in the present, we see Willie and the others battling their remaining crimson ants. The others are so quick to take them out that Willie struggles to do anything, and then he realizes he can't locate the enemies in time, and the range of their search spells is wider than his detection skills. So he thinks that at this rate, they'll wipe out all the monsters before he even has a chance to engage. Finally, he manages to defeat one of the monsters, but Wignall then uses his wind magic to wipe out all the remaining creatures in the vicinity. He remarks that Willie is more of a deadweight than he expected, questioning Lehana's decision to invite him to their party and stating that Willie can't even serve as a shield. Lehana defends Willie, saying he simply hasn't had the chance to prove himself yet, but will show his true worth when facing 5 or more enemies. She admits she hopes she is right and mentions that he's probably stronger than he seems, so it's fine if he's a bit of a deadweight right now. Julius then absorbs the magical traces of the defeated monsters into his wand and reminds Lehana that he had warned her that those who can't use search magic will only get in their way. Willie explains that by absorbing these traces, the wand stores a record of the battle, allowing the Academy to verify the monsters killed and calculate the number of credits to award. As the others prepare to leave, Willie lags behind to pick up drop items. Kali asks them to wait, but they dismiss her, saying there's no need to collect worthless items. Willie quickly catches up once he's done and explains that most people don't want to team up with him because he insists on picking up drops unlike others. Kali asks Willie if he's okay, and he assures her that he is, admitting that he expected something like this to happen from the start. He tells her that he'll try his best to help the team in other ways, but he knows he won't be much use against the tougher monsters they might face deeper in the dungeon. They continue pressing forward, and Willie can't help but think that his teammates are too exceptional, leaving him without any opportunity to prove himself. He realizes that at this rate, he will end up as nothing but a burden. Then after a few hours, Lehana notes that it's already been a day since the praxis began and suggests they take a break. But Julius is uneasy about resting in the middle of the dungeon and says he'd feel more secure with some protection. So in response, Wignall erects a fiery wall around them. Kali wonders if it's illusion magic, and after touching the flames, Willie confirms that it is, and he notices that the mere sight of the fire is keeping monsters at bay. Lehana then asks Willie to hand out the rations she gave him, so Willie distributes the rations, but when he tries to give Wignall his portion, Wignall stops him from getting closer. He tells Willie to leave his rations on the ground, explaining that he only allows those he deems worthy to touch him. Kali calls out Wignall for being so rude, but Wignall claims he is above everyone else because he is an elf and declares that Lehana is the only one he considers worthy among them. Willie stops Kali from arguing and tells her that elves have their own customs and beliefs, and it doesn't bother him. He then explains that like the dwarves, the elves also came to this land from another world, but they are a magical race. Though they can be a bit snobbish and tend to associate only with their kind, they possess greater magical abilities than most mages, and their queen is also one of the Magia Vanders. After they finish eating, Lehana lays out her plan for everyone. She explains that their number one priority is to defeat the Luminous Neighboress, which is worth 110 credits. It's the only one of its kind and serves as the floor keeper of the 10th floor. Willie thinks that this is the most credits they can earn from a single monster during the praxis, and the others mention that it's not uncommon for mages to be killed while facing it. They refer to it as the boss of the all-student praxis. Lehana then tells them that she assembled this party specifically to take down this creature, and she is confident they have the ability to defeat it and wants to prove it to the tower. Wignall asks if it's wise to ignore the other monsters they encounter along the way and head straight for the final boss. Lehana clarifies that she wants them to conserve their magic so they are in the best shape when they confront the beast, and she adds that they can always deal with the smaller monsters later and informs everyone that they should take the shortest route to the 10th floor. Willie realizes he has only managed to collect 5 credits so far, which isn't nearly enough. Though he feels a bit apprehensive about facing a floor keeper, he decides not to back down. Elsewhere, we see a guy from earlier named Headless, and his partner asks if he has dealt with the people upstairs. Headless shows that he has, mentioning they were getting on his nerves. Meanwhile, Willie and the others continue their exploration. When they reach a lower floor, they notice a large number of monster corpses scattered around. Julius wonders if another party has been there, but they find it unlikely, as they took the fastest route and didn't stop at any base camps. They are certain no other students could have made it there before them. But upon inspecting the corpses, Willie notices there is no sign of magic being used. The monsters appear to have been torn apart by brute force. Lehana then spots Neighboress's room up ahead, and the group proceeds down there. Willie notices that the dungeon is eerily quiet, and they are shocked to find Neighboress's corpse already lying in the room. They all use search skills and they detect faint traces still lingering, and Lehana observes that the creature was killed just moments ago. Willie then recalls Worker's words. Search is powerful, but it's not omnipotent because it struggles to detect crafty traps, and mages can use magic like hide to counter it, and there are also some monsters that can also evade search altogether. Willie then uses his detection skill to sense if anything is nearby and soon realizes there is a monster above them, so he quickly alerts the group. The monster attacks and Willie tries to block it, but he can't fully deflect the blow. The creature then strikes Wignall with a single swing, knocking him out cold. The mages attempt to launch a counterattack, but the monster shatters the floor beneath them before they can react. Everyone plunges down and Willie grabs hold of Wignall to shield him as they fall. Students on the floors above feel the tremors from the impact as Willie and Wignall crash down to the 11th floor. Elsewhere, Julius and Shen find themselves on the same floor and are in disbelief. The 11th floor and beyond are considered danger zones, places only high-level mages are expected to survive. Lehana and Akali have also ended up on the 11th floor, but in a different area. Lehana notes that the structure of the labyrinth and the power of the monsters is entirely different from this point onward. Kali then notices that Lehana is bleeding and expresses concern, but Lehana brushes it off, explaining she hit her head on a rock during the fall. She reassures Kali not to worry and insists they need to regroup with the others, as staying alone in this area is too dangerous. Afterward, we see Willie fiercely battling a giant snake monster, battling fiercely, and as he fights, Wignall is lost in a dream about his past. In it, he hears voices taunting him, calling him useless for not even being able to cast an illusion spell, and even Eleanor leaves him, calling him worthless. Wignall then suddenly wakes from the nightmare and notices the corpse of the giant snake lying beside him. Willie is relieved to see him awake, and Wignall shockingly wonders if Willie defeated the monster on his own. Willie then attempts to treat Wignall's injuries, but Wignall pulls away, refusing to let him touch him. Willie calmly tells him that he doesn't care if Wignall hates him or even tries to kill him, but he can't just leave him in this condition, so he pleads with Wignall to at least let him treat his arm. But Wignall insists he can handle it himself, and after Willie hands him the supplies, he begins to bandage his arm. Willie then notices that most of their supplies, including the medical kit, are ruined. He then checks the ground and sees they have 3 sub-weapons left if he includes Rossi's magic items. They also have enough food and water to last 2 days, assuming the others have their own pouches of supplies, but then Willie realizes that under the extreme conditions of the 11th floor, they might only survive for a day at most. So he tells Wignall they need to find Kali and the others as quickly as possible. He then asks if Wignall is strong enough to move around the dungeon, but Wignall reminds him that standard protocol is to wait for rescue if they get stranded. But Willie responds that doing nothing will get them killed and insists that help won't arrive in time, especially since the monster they just faced is still lurking around the 10th floor. Meanwhile, Wagner contacts Professor Eliza on the 8th floor, where she is battling a swarm of monsters as students run around in panic. She explains that they have been hit by a stampede, and the base camp has been devastated. Wagner asks about the other teachers, and Eliza grimly informs him that they were killed and their heads ripped off. She adds that she hasn't received any communication from the 9th floor or below, but she suspects things are just as bad there. Wagner thinks this can't be a coincidence and wonders what's going on. Edward then tells him that the all-student praxis is cancelled, and they head down to rescue the remaining students. Meanwhile, on the 11th floor, Willie and Wignall are wandering through the labyrinth. Wignall repeatedly uses his search magic to look for enemies, so Willie advises him not to overuse the spell, warning that it could drain his magic power, but Wignall refuses to listen. He argues that another ambush could be waiting for them at any moment, and can't stay calm in this situation. But Willie remains composed and explains that distance is what matters most in search spells, so he suggests Wignall use the spell at 140 mil intervals to detect distant enemies, and he will signal Wignall when to cast it in order to conserve his magic. Willie then assures him he'll handle the detection of nearby enemies, which will be much more efficient, and he promises that he and Kiki will deal with any ambushes, stressing that they need to avoid unnecessary fights. Wignall is surprised by Willie's calm demeanor in such a dire situation, so Willie explains that he has no choice but to rely on his praxis credits if he wants to climb the tower, which is why he has studied the dungeon extensively. He reveals he has been stranded about 100 times while exploring, giving him a bit more experience than Wignall, but Wignall doesn't seem too pleased with that statement. Willie then spots enemies approaching them, 3 swine demons known as Gurjesa. With no choice but to fight as the other route is also filled with monsters, Willie asks Wignall to handle the one behind them while he takes on the 2 in front. Wignall manages to make the piggy behind them fall with a burst of wind magic, while Willie swiftly slices through the 2 piggies in front with ease. Wignall is amazed by Willie's quick moves and realizes that Willie has turned his wisdom into power, while he feels like nothing in comparison. Suddenly, the piggy Wignall tripped earlier tries to attack again, and without enough time to counter, Wignall resorts to a fire illusion to buy some time. Willie warns him against this, but it's too late. The monster sees through the illusion and charges. Then Willie quickly steps in, throwing a dagger that pierces the piggy, and then he slices the creature in half. And then he explains that Gurjesa relies on their keen sense of smell rather than sight, so illusions won't work on them. Wignall laughs bitterly, calling himself a disgrace. Willie tries to encourage him, saying he'll get them next time, but Wignall confesses that he isn't talented, he's just one of the dregs, a laggard. Wignall continues, explaining that of all the elves who have come to this academy, he is the only one still here after 6 long years. Every other elf had already ascended the tower, and before they left, they had only one thing to say to him. They called him a disgrace to elfkind. The reason for their disdain was his illusion magic. Typically, elven illusion magic is special because it gives illusions a physical form, something people can touch and interact with. But Wignall's illusions were different. They were nothing more than ordinary illusions, intangible and insubstantial. Willie can't understand how Wignall could be considered a failure when he is one of the top 3 students in the academy. But the fact that Wignall is still there and hasn't ascended the tower yet makes him, in some eyes, just the best of the trash left behind. Lehana shares a similar perspective, believing that regardless of one's position within the academy, if a person is truly talented, they will ascend the tower one way or another. Over the past 6 years, Lehana has watched many talented people leave her behind. It was during this time that she realized she wasn't good enough for the tower to notice her. Even her title as number 1 at the academy feels meaningless because in the grand scheme of things, the academy is just a small pond in a vast ocean. Only those with true talent can make a name for themselves. Wignall learned this harsh truth early in life, and it came from none other than his childhood friend Eleanor. They grew up together, and Wignall was incredibly fond of her. He wanted to stay by her side forever. But one day, while practicing magic together, Eleanor decided to give it a try. Despite it being her first time ever holding a wand, she wielded magic with extraordinary skill. This exceptional ability marked her as a candidate to become the new elf queen and Magiavander, and she was taken away from Wignall. Determined to catch up, Wignall trained his magic to its absolute limits, but no matter how hard he worked, he remained inferior to his peers. This constant feeling of inadequacy fueled his resentment toward other mages like Willie as he struggled with his own insecurities. Wignall expects Willie to mock him after hearing his story, but instead, Willie smiles and tells him that they have more in common than he thought. Wignall, feeling down, tells Willie that he doesn't need to try and comfort him. He believes that in his current state, he would be nothing more than a hindrance, so he's fine with being left behind. But Willie stands up, determined, and tells Wignall he won't leave him behind. He reassures him not to worry about being a burden because in his eyes, Wignall is an incredible elf, so Willie promises to protect him until he can find the strength to stand and fight again. A few minutes later, Wignall and Willie find themselves battling a variety of monsters on this challenging floor. Everything they've encountered so far is level 5 or higher, normally too difficult to handle. Yet Willie is cutting through the monsters with ease as if they were nothing. Once the fight is over, Willie returns to Wignall to check on him. Wignall is confused and asks why Willie would risk his own safety for someone like him, especially when he has no obligation to do so. Willie simply replies that he's doing it because he believes Wignall is a good person. Just then, Willie's senses alert him to something behind them. Wignall asks what it is, and Willie replies that he heard a strange noise. Wignall uses his search magic to scan the area, but he doesn't see anything nearby. That's because the sound wasn't coming from a monster directly. It's the dungeon itself creating a new creature. Wignall and Willie remain vigilant, preparing for whatever may come, but suddenly, a dungeon pimple opens above them and green liquid starts pouring out. Several monsters emerge from the ooze. Willie immediately recognizes the danger and acts fast, launching serval booms to try and kill them before they can fully form an attack. But those monsters known as Balkers are notoriously hard to defeat. They are immune to all physical attacks and highly resistant to most magic. The only thing that can truly affect them is elven illusion magic. Unfortunately, there's no way for Willie or Wignall to run, so Willie turns to Wignall and asks for his help, urging him to lend his strength so they can defeat these monsters together. Wignall begins to panic, breaking down under the pressure. He tells Willie that he can't do it. He knows his illusion magic is flawed, and even if he tries his best, he'll inevitably make a mistake. But Willie remains calm and reassures him, saying it's okay to make mistakes. He reminds Wignall that neither of them are geniuses and errors are just part of the journey, and if they're too afraid to try because of mistakes, they'll never move forward. Wignall warns Willie that if he messes up the illusion magic, Willie could die. But Willie, with unwavering determination, tells him that he won't let himself die. He has a dream to reach the tower and reunite with Elfaria, and until that happens, dying is not an option. Wignall is struck speechless by Willie's conviction. He realizes that unlike him, Willie has never let his perceived inferiority stop him from moving forward, and he finds himself admiring that courage. The Balkers begin their assault, and Willie charges forward to keep them distracted. However, his sword can't harm them, making it clear that Wignall has to act quickly. Taking a deep breath, Wignall raises his wand and casts his spell, desperately hoping it will work this time. But to his horror, his magic has no effect on the Balkers, and he is consumed with the fear that his mistake will cost Willie his life. Just as all the Balkers aim their deadly blasts at Willie, Kiki rushes in and creates a protective shield to save him at the last second. Willie shouts to Wignall, urging him to try again, his voice filled with unwavering belief. Hearing Willie say, "I believe in you," shakes Wignall to his core. No one from his own people ever believed in him, but now that no longer matters, because Willie's belief in him is enough, so he is now determined not to betray that trust and to prove that he can one day catch up to Eleanor. With renewed determination, Wignall finally manages to cast his illusion magic properly, conjuring a vast, dense forest that overwhelms and destroys all the Balkers. Willie, overjoyed, watches as Wignall's magic succeeds, but as he turns around, he sees Wignall kneeling on the ground. Wignall humbly formally apologizes to Willie for his rude behavior earlier, and he admits he now realizes that Willie is truly a warrior worthy of respect. Willie smiles warmly and says he has always respected Wignall as well. Extending his hand, Willie offers a gesture of friendship, and they shake hands, solidifying their newfound bond. Afterward, Willie pulls out a magic map crafted by Roasty. With a few drops of the user's blood, it can automatically create a detailed map of the surrounding area. Meanwhile, Kiki remains alert, still remembering Kali and Shen's scent, and as long as there are traces of them, she'll be able to track them down. Meanwhile, in another part of the dungeon, Julius and Shen are making their way through the dark and winding corridors. Julius, feeling parched, asks Shen if he still has any water rations left. Shen does, but he warns that water is a precious resource in a place like this, and they can't afford to waste it carelessly. So he tells him to use some of his ice magic and licks it. But Julius complains and retorts that they shouldn't waste magic either, and they bicker for a moment before calming down. To be safe, Julius uses a search spell to check for any nearby monsters, but he doesn't find anything, so he relaxes slightly. But just as he starts to let his guard down, Shen grabs him by the collar and pulls him into cover. Julius confusedly protests that his scan didn't detect any monsters, but Shen quickly reminds him that they've already experienced the flaw of the search spell, and some demons can evade detection entirely. So Shen uses the heat-sensing spell and sees the outlines of several evil sentinels heading their way. To his surprise, it's not just one or two. There are dozens of them, an unusual occurrence in the dungeon. Julius suspects that their appearance was triggered by the monster on the 10th floor. Shen steps forward, determined to confront the sentinels, and asks Julius to create some clones to distract them, but Julius warns him that it's too dangerous. There's no way they could survive against so many sentinels at once. But Shen isn't backing down and explains that the reason he was humiliated by Willie in the past was because he couldn't defeat an evil sentinel, and now he needs to prove to himself that he's strong enough to face them. Meanwhile, at the base camp on floor 7, chaos erupts as evil sentinels launch an attack. The students are in a panic, running for their lives. And just as one student is about to be crushed, Professor Edward intervenes, using his magic to decapitate the sentinel and save them. He orders all students to retreat to the 6th floor. Wagner arrives just in time, flying in on a sky racer to take Edward deeper into the dungeon to rescue more students, and luckily most of the students had reached the 8th floor when the attack began, but one team had ventured further. And it's Lehana's team who has already made it to the 10th floor and is on their way to confront the floor's boss. Edward worries they won't be able to locate the team in time given the massive size of the 10th floor, but Wagner reassures him, saying he knows exactly where Lehana's team is thanks to Kiki, who is with Willie. Kiki's gemstone is linked to the one Wagner holds, allowing him to track them. On the 11th floor, we see Kali and Lehana. Kali is carefully leaving stones behind to mark their path, ensuring they can retrace their steps. As they move forward, Kali asks how long it has been since they arrived. Lehana replies that it's been 16 hours since they got stuck on the 11th floor, and they've already run out of food and water. They tried to get some rest whenever possible, but the relentless monster attacks have barely given them a moment to recover. Kali acknowledges that it's only thanks to Lehana's skills that they've managed to survive this long, but she knows that even Lehana has her limits and fears they are nearing them. Lehana stops for a moment, her face filled with regret, and apologizes to Kali for the whole situation. She admits that it was her idea to rush to the 10th floor, and that decision has now left them stranded here. But Kali shakes her head, dismissing Lehana's guilt. She tells her it's not her fault, the blame lies with the monster on that floor that caused all this. Besides, Kali points out Lehana never even invited her to join in the first place. Kali just showed up on her own. So if anyone is to blame for her being stuck down here, it's herself. Still, she remains confident that Willie will find her tracks and come to their rescue soon. Meanwhile, someone does find the tracks, but it isn't Willie. Then we see Wignall and Willie running through the dungeon, sensing the presence of a mage nearby. As they turn a corner, they come upon Shen, standing atop a pile of defeated sentinel corpses. Wignall is stunned, unable to believe that Shen managed to defeat them all on his own. But then Julius emerges from behind and shouts that Shen didn't do it alone. He had to sacrifice dozens of his clones just to give Shen the chance to win. Willie is relieved to see both Shen and Julius alive, but quickly notices that Lehana and Kali are nowhere to be seen. When he asks if either of them knows where the girls are, Julius replies that he thought they were with Willie. Realizing that no one knows their whereabouts, Willie grows anxious about the thought that Lehana and Kali are still out there on their own, and who knows what dangers they might face. Meanwhile, on the 11th floor, Kali spots someone approaching them. She is about to call out, but Lehana grabs her arm and pulls her back, sensing something is off. The figure looks like Professor Bruno, but as he steps closer, his head suddenly falls off. The head rolls on the ground and in a bizarre and unsettling manner. He writes a message to greet the girls. Then Headless's partner Mars appears and he seems irritated, complaining that Headless was supposed to handle everything upstairs, so he demands to know how a couple of kids managed to make it past him. Headless explains that Duke failed to kill the children immediately, somehow causing a breach in the dungeon that allowed them to reach his floor. Mars, however, is uninterested in excuses, and his only concern is making sure that there are no witnesses left to report their presence. As Headless and Mars continue talking, Kali suddenly accuses them of killing their professors. Headless doesn't deny it. In fact, he proudly admits it. He declares that he and Mars are villains with a mission to destroy the false sky. This makes no sense to Kali and Lehana. They know the barrier is the only thing keeping the Celestial at bay, so if those two want to destroy it, they must be trying to bring about the very calamity ancient lore warned them about. Headless, sensing he has explained enough, smirks and announces he'll be taking the girls' heads now, so he unleashes a powerful slash spell at them. But before the attack can reach, Willie leaps down and blocks it just in time. Willie and the others manage to find Kali by following the trail she left behind. Though if he doesn't fully understand what's going on, Willie knows they have to act fast. Without hesitation, he charges at Headless, hoping to buy time for the others to come up with a plan. But before he can get close, Headless casually blasts in with a burst of energy, sending Willie flying backward. Headless is clearly enjoying himself, taunting them and remarking how much he would love to add all their heads to his collection. However, Mars, annoyed by his partner's antics, drags him away, reminding him they still have a job to finish. But before leaving, Headless opens a teleportation gate and summons Duke, telling him to handle the kids. Moments later, the monstrous creature from the 10th floor appears through the gate, blocking any means of escape. With no way out, the team realizes they have no choice but to face the monster head-on. But just as things start looking grim, the Duke fires an energy blast that nearly wipes them out. The plan instantly changes. None of them are equipped to face this monster right now. So Willie quickly orders everyone to retreat into the passage behind them, but Wignall stays behind to stall the Duke. He casts his illusion magic, conjuring a massive root wall to block the Duke's path. But unfortunately, the wall proves useless as the Duke rips through it with sheer brute strength. So now Wignall finds himself dangerously close to the monster. But without any hesitation, Willie rushes in, dragging Wignall out of the way just before he gets obliterated. The blast from the Duke, however, causes a cave-in, separating the Duke from Willie and the others with a mountain of rubble. Finally safe, at least for the moment, Kali asks what kind of monster they're dealing with and why it's so powerful. Willie, recalling something he read in the Academy's library, explains that it's a Grand Duke, an evil creature of the Greater Demon class, typically found only on the 25th floor. But why would one appear here? Lehana theorizes that it might be the work of the evil mages they encountered earlier. Regardless, if they have more immediate concerns, the Duke may have been delayed for now, but it's guaranteed to come after them, and it's even ordered all the demon-type monsters on this floor to hunt them down. The chances of survival seem bleak, and Julius begins to panic, terrified of dying in this forsaken dungeon. Lehana then feels the weight of responsibility and blames herself for leading them into this hopeless situation. They're battered, exhausted, and stuck in a dangerous place with limited supplies, so Julius has every reason to be freaking out. But just as the tension reaches a peak, Willie speaks up. He insists that they need to fight back, because if they don't, they won't survive. The demons have a wide reach, controlling multiple floors, so sneaking past them is virtually impossible. But if they can defeat the Duke, the demons will fall into disarray, giving the group their one and only chance to escape. Julius initially scoffs at Willie's plan, calling it reckless. He doubts they can take down the Duke on their own, but Willie insists he has a strategy in mind. Willie makes it clear that he won't force anyone to join if they don't want to, but Julius remains openly resistant, refusing to take orders from Willie. However, Wignall steps in, expressing his trust in Willie's abilities. Kali and Shen follow suit, acknowledging Willie's deep knowledge of dungeons, though Shen still harbors personal dislike for him. Wignall then turns to Lehana, and although he knows she doesn't fully trust Willie, Wignall has come to respect his competence and urges her to do the same, so Lehana agrees, vowing to put her full trust in Willie. She declares him the team leader, and the group commits to following his orders. Julius remains skeptical, believing Willie's leadership won't be enough to guarantee victory. Surprisingly, Willie agrees with Julius, explaining that they can't win if he leads alone. That's why Willie needs Julius's power. As an ice mage, Julius is the only one who can replicate the ancient magic of Wistoria, and Willie plans to teach him one of her secret techniques to make their plan work. Soon after, the group puts Willie's plan into motion. Willie runs across the dungeon floor, baiting the Duke to follow. As the Grand Duke comes within range, Julius, perched on a nearby ledge, begins casting his spell. The Duke, seeing the threat, fires a blast to kill him, but the target turns out to be a clone. More clones of Julius appear, all continuing to cast the spell. This, Willie reveals, is the secret to Wistoria's magic. Normally, if a mage's incantation is interrupted, they have to start over from scratch. However, Wistoria's technique allows clones to share the spell-casting process. When one clone is destroyed mid-incantation, another can seamlessly continue casting. So this clever trick buys them the precious time needed to cast an advanced spell, something that would normally be impossible under pressure. Julius, struggling to maintain his clones, is pushed to his limits. He hates that he's stuck with the hardest job, but with all his clones destroyed, he has no choice but to break cover and finish the spell himself. Seeing this, Willie orders the others to do whatever it takes to slow the Duke down, giving Julius the time he needs. So Kali, Wignall, and Shen launch their spells at the Duke, but as expected, they barely make a dent. Willie had warned them that the Duke's wings were indestructible, but the group needs to stall it somehow. In a desperate move, Willie charges in with his sword, attempting to slash one of its wings. While he manages to push the Duke down for a moment, he's quickly shaken off, realizing that neither magic nor physical attacks are doing much. But that's fine, because at this point, their sole job is to serve as decoys until Julius completes his spell. The team works together, relentlessly distracting the Duke, and finally, Julius is able to complete his spell, sending a barrage of massive icicles crashing into the monster. Julius is completely drained, but even after unleashing his most powerful magic, he only manages to injure the Duke. As expected, the beast's resilience is overwhelming. However, Willie had anticipated this outcome. The damage inflicted, while not fatal, should weaken the Duke enough for Lehana's close-quarters strike to finish the job. So now everything depends on her. Lehana then moves swiftly, darting around the battlefield and managing to get within striking distance of the Duke. She goes in for the killing blow, but just as her weapon is about to connect, she's stopped by a barrier. The Duke has an automatic defense spell, likely cast by the evil mages they encountered earlier. This slight moment of delay causes her to lose her window of opportunity, and the Duke counterattacks. Willie, acting fast, rushes in and grabs Lehana, pulling her out of danger. But as they run, they can't evade all of the Duke's blasts. Realizing they're about to be overwhelmed, Willie calls for Kiki to create a shield just in time to protect him and Lehana. However, in the chaos, Willie's goggles are shattered, and before he can react, a blast is headed straight for him. Meanwhile, Wagner and Edward are rushing toward the 11th floor to rescue the students, but Wagner is bewildered by the situation. A Grand Duke appearing on such a low floor makes no sense to him. Despite their shock, they know they can't do anything until they arrive, so they can only hope the students can hold out long enough. Back on the battlefield, Willie is hit by the Duke's blast, but Wignall reacts quickly, using magic to catch both Willie and Lehana. The others rush over to check on them. Lehana insists she's fine, but she's more concerned about Willie, who had taken the brunt of the attack. Willie, while visibly shaken, is more shocked by the fact that the goggles Wistoria had gifted him have been destroyed. Then, as the Grand Duke begins to break free from the ice spell that Julius cast, Shen suggests they prepare for another attack. But Lehana, recognizing the danger, tells everyone they need to retreat. She urges them to take Willy and run, offering to hold off the monster as long as she can. Although she knows her sacrifice will only buy a little time, she's willing to give her life if it means the others can survive. Kali tries to dissuade her, but Lehana, filled with guilt for failing to defeat the Duke earlier, feels this is her responsibility. Wignall then steps up beside Lehana, declaring that he will stay and fight as well. Aside from Lehana, Willy is the only human he truly respects, and he wants to help protect him. So together, they charge at the Duke. Lehana attempts to get within striking distance again, while Wignall uses his magic to restrain the Duke, forcing it to expose its core. But just as Lehana is about to strike, the Duke breaks free with terrifying strength, knocking her back with a powerful blow. The sight of the Duke easily overpowering both Lehana and Wignall deepens Shen's sense of hopelessness. He's paralyzed with fear, convinced that Lehana and Wignall are going to die, and that his only option is to run and save himself. Desperately trying to rationalize his thoughts, Shen is abruptly interrupted by Willy, who is visibly panicking. Without his goggles, Willy is overwhelmed with fear, unable to stop shaking. So in a desperate plea, Willy asks Shen to punch him in the face, hoping the shock will snap him out of his panic. Shen is furious when he sees Willy trembling in fear. This was the guy who gave the team hope, the one who convinced them to fight the Grand Duke. And now he's cowering like a scared puppy. So Shen starts beating on Willy, blaming him for everything going wrong, and Willy doesn't even fight back, but eventually Willy pulls himself together, thanking Shen for the beating because it helped him snap out of it. Shen is dumbfounded seeing Willy smile when just moments ago he was scared out of his mind. But Willy simply picks up his sword and asks Kali to watch over Kiki while he goes back into the fight. Shen can't wrap his head around how Willy bounced back so fast, but Kali clears things up. Willy's still terrified. He's just fighting despite the fear, like he always does. Shen's skeptical because he's never seen Willy show fear before, but he doesn't know what it's like to fight with a sword. As a mage, Shen can keep his distance while attacking, but Willy has to get up close, risking his life against enemies much bigger and stronger. So who wouldn't be terrified in that situation? But what really scares Willy more than anything else is the thought of running away or losing the people he cares about, and that's what drives him to keep fighting. Kali then tells Shen she's going to join Willy in the fight, leaving Shen feeling ashamed of himself because he thought about abandoning the team. Meanwhile, the monster keeps attacking Willy. He tries to figure out a way to take it down, but its defenses are rock solid and it's so fast it's hard to land a hit, so their only chance is to cut off the Duke's wings. Kali then fires a barrage of rocks to distract the Duke, and with Lehana and Wignall out of commission, it's up to her and Willy to finish the job. As the Duke powers up a brutal series of attacks, Willy braces himself to face them head-on, but without Kiki's shield, one direct hit could be deadly. But because he's seen this attack before, Willy manages to dodge every blast with expert precision. And by the time the dust settles, Willy is soaring through the air, zeroing in on the Duke. Kali knows exactly what Willy's trying to pull off, so she pours everything she's got into crafting the strongest sword possible for him. And with it, Willy manages to take out one of the Duke's wings. Now the Duke can't defend itself anymore. They just need to land a finishing blow, and luckily Shen's here to do just that. He rides in on his guardian, playing the perfect distraction while he chants an advanced spell. Once he's close enough, Shen unleashes the Inferno spell at point-blank range. But even that isn't enough to finish the Duke off. If a wand and a sword can't bring this monster down, Willy's running out of ideas. Just then, a shard of ice crashes down from the ceiling, and it's from Rosti. Willy doesn't know Rosti's there, but he hopes the ice will trigger something in his memory. We flash back to a moment of Willy as an infant in his mother's arms. She had always believed that Willy would one day unite the power of the wand and sword. Suddenly, Willy gets a spark of inspiration. He rushes to grab his sword and yells at Shen to shoot some magic his way. Without hesitation, Shen does as told, firing magic at Willy. Willy slashes through the magic, letting the energy flow straight into the blade. Now with power surging through him like never before, Willy feels invincible. And with a single precise strike, he slices the Grand Duke cleanly in half, finally bringing the monster down. Everyone is awestruck by what just transpired, and Willy collapses to his knees, utterly drained of strength. Even he isn't quite sure what just happened as his sword reverts to its normal form. Wignall is overjoyed that Willy has defeated the Grand Duke, but he doesn't get to bask in the moment for long because soon they're surrounded by hordes of evil sentinels and guards. Wignall quickly realizes they must have rushed over after hearing the Grand Duke's death cry, and Lehana notes that this is really bad because they have no strength left to fight. Then while the professors are rushing to help the kids, one of the sentinels lunges at Julius, and Wagner realizes they won't make it in time to stop the attack. But suddenly, a powerful spell obliterates all the sentinels and guards in the area. Willy recognizes the spell as advanced annihilation magic and wonders who could have cast it. His attention is drawn to a group of people, and Shen is stunned by the wand their leader is carrying. When the leader reveals his face, both Wagner and Edward are utterly floored by his identity. It is none other than Aaron Mysterious, the former king of Magiavanders, and as Willie explains, he is the wielder of the strongest magic wand. Willie is puzzled, wondering what Aaron is doing here and noting that their group has deep dungeon equipment, likely returning from an expedition. Aaron then announces that he has bestowed the blessing of light upon those who stood against the darkness of the dungeon. He commends them for their bravery, and the students relieved to be saved bow before him. Even Wignall, though an elf, shows his respect. All eyes are drawn to Aaron, but Willie focuses on the small man standing beside him. The little man approaches Willie and, with a knowing look, remarks that he's surprised the sword is still alive. He asks for Willie's name, and after Willie introduces himself, the man introduces himself as Finn and reveals his face. Later, we see the two shady men from earlier relieved that they arrived just in time to collect their goods. Mars, holding a sword, mentions that they wouldn't have been able to snag it if they'd been chased, and adds that he'd rather avoid running into that group again. Headless then chimes in, saying they've completed their mission and can now celebrate with a party from hell. Later, the chaotic events at the all-student praxis finally come to an end, leaving behind 11 dead, all of them professors from the academy. Thanks to the quick actions of the surviving professors, none of the students lost their lives. Based on witness reports, warrants have been issued for the culprits, but no real leads have surfaced yet. For now, the survivors are resting as the academy has temporarily closed, and we also find Willie and his friends resting in a medical room. Shen, still puzzled, wonders aloud who those creepy guys were, but Wignall, equally clueless, notes how insane they must have been to murder so many professors. Kali, also still in disbelief, laments that Professor Bruno and the others are really gone. Julie is clearly shaken, ponders what would have happened if Aaron hadn't arrived just in time to save them. Lehana speaks up, reminding them that they should be grateful they survived at all. She admits that when she formed this party, it was to gain recognition from the tower, but she unexpectedly discovered she had a better eye for people than she thought. With a smile, she thanks everyone, right before her stomach growls loudly, ruining the heartfelt moment. Kali laughs and hands Lehana an apple, and she takes it gratefully and immediately asks for more. Kali obliges, feeding her one after another, until Lehana devours all but one. Kali then teases her, saying she never knew Lehana was such a glutton. Lehana embarrassedly denies it, explaining that her magic is to blame. She elaborates that her magic drains a lot of physical and magical energy, which is why her energy consumption is worse than the average mage. She insists she's not just a food-obsessed knight and hopes the others don't think less of her. But the rest of the group finds it hard to believe, and Kali jokingly dubs her the Hungry Knight. Shen can't believe that Miss Perfect has such a big appetite, while Wignall mentions that even he found it hard to believe when he first learned about it. Willie, chuckling, adds that while he considers himself a big eater, even he can't compete with her appetite. Lehana then shifts the conversation back to the main issue, and as Kali peels the last apple, she commends Willie on his judgment and bravery during the last battle, and says that they would have been annihilated without him. Willie, clearly uncomfortable with the praise, brushes it off, saying they only made it through because everyone worked together. Julius, however, chimes in, agreeing, but also pointing out that they almost got killed because of Willie's bold plan. He admits that at one point he was so scared he couldn't stop shaking. He adds that Willie's plan put a huge burden on him and that it was incredibly reckless. But before he can say more, Kali shoves the apple into his mouth, nearly choking him to shut him up. Shen then turns to Willie, asking about the mysterious power he used during the fight, and Kali, still curious, mentions how incredible it was, so much so that it made her hold her breath. Lehana adds that it seemed like Willie's sword had somehow contained the spell, though Wignall is certain it wasn't just an enchantment. Lehana, not entirely sure, wonders aloud if they can even call it magic. Julius, now able to speak again, says that Willie should have told them about this power earlier since his secrecy could have put them all in danger. But again, before he can say more, Kiki, annoyed by Julius's tone, scratches him with her paws, and Shen urges Willie to answer. Willie, looking a bit lost, admits that he had no idea he possessed such a power. He explains that his mind went completely blank during the moment it happened. Kali suggests that maybe the professors might know something about it, and Lehana agrees, adding that they should definitely ask them since it felt like something extraordinary, not just a typical magic phenomenon. Willie then remembers the small boy named Finn from the expedition team and wonders who he was. Wignall quickly figures out he's talking about the supporter and suggests that Finn might be from the Finn tribe. Lehana, thinking back, says she's read about them in the literature the House of Owenzos keeps. She explains that although the Finn tribe can't use magic, they've accumulated a wealth of knowledge about dungeons over generations. They've had a contract with the tower since the time of the Mage Queen and act as guides for dungeon explorers. People even say it's impossible to venture deeper into the dungeon without their help, and we then see Rusty listening in from outside the room. Willie, still thinking about Finn, wonders about the strange feeling he had when they met. Later, we see Finn meeting with Cauldron, and Cauldron greets him, remarking that it's been a long time since they last saw each other. She asks how deep he ventured into the dungeon this time, to which Finn responds that he made it as far as the 49th floor. He adds that Aaron really pushed him to his limits. Finn then shows her a sword they retrieved from the dungeon called the Mage Slayer. He explains they came across it after battling a group of shady individuals on the 40th floor. The encounter was intense, and they lost 20 high mages during the fight. He stresses that these were no ordinary opponents, so they couldn't afford to hold back. He then speculates that the Mage Slayer didn't appear naturally in the dungeon, and that the people they fought were likely running experiments down there. Cauldron listens intently, realizing he's suggesting someone created this weapon by combining a variety of rare materials, including those only found in the deepest floors. Finn further reveals that Aaron has tasked him with returning for another survey, but for now he leaves the analysis of the weapon in her capable hands. Cauldron apologizes for placing such a burden on him and muses that there are definitely some nasty characters working behind the scenes. Finn urges her to be cautious before shifting the conversation. He then asks pointedly why she didn't inform him about Willie. He remarks that while wands fall under her jurisdiction, swords are his domain. Cauldron then responds that Willie is a student of her academy, and though he's obsessed with wands above all else, his true goal is to climb the tower and reach Magia Vander's. Finn sighs, clearly perplexed, admitting he's never heard of a sword aspiring to become a wand. Cauldron agrees that it's highly unusual, but she believes this unprecedented situation might give rise to something new and impactful. Hearing this, Finn concedes, agreeing to let her handle it for now. However, as he departs, he adds with a sly smile that he'll be meddling in Willie's affairs as well from now on. Next, we see Willie back at it, practicing with his sword, and Kali can't believe he's training so soon. She points out that everyone else is still too banged up to move, but Willie tells her he just couldn't sit still. He admits there's a lot he doesn't understand yet, but he has to keep moving forward because there's a place he's determined to reach. Watching him, Julius wonders what kind of body Willie has, then jokingly asks if he's secretly a dwarf. Windmill then shoots him a look, warning him not to call Willie a dwarf, especially since he's the sworn friend of an elf and a warrior deserving of respect. Lehanna also chimes in, saying Willie's simplicity and dedication are what makes him strong. Then suddenly, Shen shouts at Willie, demanding a fight. He jumps down, immediately wincing as his injured body protests. Kali quickly scolds him, telling him not to even think about fighting in his condition. Shen, being as stubborn as ever, refuses to listen, saying if Willie can move, so can he. Willie, however, urges him to rest and focus on healing. But Shen doesn't back down, reminding Willie that he promised they'd have a proper fight after the Grand Magic Games. He challenges him to keep his word, adding that someone who can't even beat him has no chance of reaching the tower. Hearing this, Willie reluctantly agrees to the fight. Shen then hurls spells at him, but Willie skillfully dodges or deflects them all. Shen keeps attacking, refusing to back off. But just then, Professor Wagner strolls by and catches sight of their unsanctioned duel, and the moment the students see him, they scatter and make a run for it, while Iris watches from a distance, keeping an eye on Willie. 2 months pass after the chaos of the all-student praxis, and the students finally return to their classes. Professor then Wagner addresses them, acknowledging that some might still feel uneasy after what happened, but he stresses that their studies must continue. He reminds them that the school year is almost over, and it's time for their final exams. He hands out the test papers, and as Willie takes his thoughts drift to Elfaria. He knows that once he graduates from the academy, he'll finally get the chance to see her again. This was the final episode. Subscribe for more anime recaps.